There is a shadow on the wall in the very first minute of Futurama, a small dark shape that falls across a cryogenic lab in the last seconds of 1999, and for years almost nobody knew what it was. A delivery boy leans back in a chair, the countdown to the year 2000 plays on a screen behind him, and something you are not meant to notice tips him backwards into a frozen tube where he will sleep for 1,000 years. Everyone remembers the joke. Almost nobody, for the longest time, saw the shadow. That shadow is the whole secret. Tonight, we are going to walk through all of it, the entire Fry conspiracy, from that first frame to the very last one, slowly, in order, until it makes a terrible kind of sense. So get comfortable, turn the lights down low, we will be here a while. And if you have not subscribed yet, it genuinely does help us keep making these. Let me start where the series starts, on the surface, with the story you were told the first time, because you have to understand the lie before the truth can mean anything. It is December 31st, 1999, in a version of New York that looks like the New York any of us would recognize. A young man named Philip J. Fry is delivering a pizza on the coldest, loneliest night of the year, and everything about his life is small. He works as a delivery boy for Panucci's Pizza. His girlfriend has just left him. He is not good at his job, he is not going anywhere, and the century is about to turn over into a new one, while he rides his bike through the slush to bring a pizza to an address that turns out to be a cryogenics lab, ordered under the name I.C. Wiener, a prank, a joke at his expense. One more small humiliation in a night already full of them. He takes the call, sitting in a lab full of frozen sleepers. He realizes he has been made a fool of one more time. And he leans back in the chair in that particular way a person leans back when the fight has gone out of them, and the chair tips, and he falls, and behind him a cryogenic tube happens to be open, and the lid closes, and the timer sets itself for 1,000 years. Philip J. Fry is frozen on the last night of the old millennium and does not wake up until the last night of the next one. That is the accident. That is how it looks. And I want you to hold on to how completely, how convincingly it is sold to you as an accident, because the entire emotional weight of everything that comes later depends on how ordinary this moment is made to feel. There is no ominous music. There is no villain in the frame that you are meant to register. There is a bored, sad young man, a stupid prank, a badly balanced chair, and 1,000 years of ice. Futurama, in its opening minutes, tells you that the biggest thing that will ever happen to this character is a piece of dumb bad luck. And you believe it because why would you not? People fall into things, chairs tip. The universe does not need a reason. When Fry wakes up, it is December 31st in the year 2999, on the edge of the year 3000, and the world he knew is 1,000 years gone. This first episode is called Space Pilot 3000. It carries the production code 1ACV01. It was the very first thing Futurama ever aired, and it went out on the 28th of March, 1999, written by the creators Matt Groening and David X. Cohen, and directed by Rich Moore and Gregg Vanzo. I mention those names now because they matter later when we start asking how much of this was planned and how early. Hold the year in your head. This is a series that will spend the next stretch of its life across 2 networks, a cancellation, 4 films, another cancellation, and eventually a streaming revival, quietly circling back to explain what really happened in this exact room on this exact night. Almost no other cartoon has ever tried to run a payoff that long, because this is what the accident conceals. Fry did not fall, Fry was pushed. Somewhere behind him, in the shadows under the equipment, a creature that looks like a small black animal with enormous eyes reached out and tipped his chair the last crucial inch, and then hid and let 1,000 years pass, and let Fry believe for most of his new life that his entire displacement in time was nothing more than clumsiness. The being that did it is not an accident of the universe. It is one of the oldest and most deliberate intelligences that has ever existed. And it did this to him on purpose, with full knowledge of the cost, because it had calculated that this one specific, unremarkable pizza boy was the only creature in all of existence who could save everything. That is the conspiracy. In one sentence, that is the whole thing. A cosmic intelligence engineered the entire course of a man's life, tore him out of his own century and away from everyone he loved, and let him think it was his own fault because it needed him alive 1,000 years in the future to fight a war he did not know existed. Everything else, the aliens, the brainwave, the grandfather paradox, the flower at the end, is Futurama showing its work, laying out step by step how that sentence is true and what it cost the man it was true about. And what stays with me right from the start is the patience of it. They could have told you in the pilot, they could have flashed the villain, cut to the creature, given you a wink. Instead, they gave you a shadow so small and so quick that for years, the standard experience of watching the first episode was to see it and not see it, to have the answer sitting in your peripheral vision the entire time, while the story insisted there was no answer, there was just a chair. The people who built this were mathematicians and computer scientists and physicists as much as they were comedy writers. And they constructed the reveal the way you construct a proof, with the conclusion hidden inside the premises from the first line. Tonight is the long version of noticing the shadow. Let us take it slowly, so let us look properly at that shadow, because it is the single most argued over frame in the whole series, and it earns the attention. In Space Pilot 3000, at the moment Fry falls, there is a shape. Depending on how you watch and which version you are watching, you might catch a small dark silhouette on the wall or beneath the desk, a low crouched form with a large round head, cast against the light of the lab as Fry goes over backwards. It is on screen for less than a second. It is not framed, it is not lit. Nothing in the scene draws your eye toward it. If you did not already know what you were looking for, you would never look. And that is exactly the point, because only a few weeks later, in the 4th episode ever broadcast, a small black alien with an enormous round head named Nibbler turned up, adopted by Leela as a pet, and once fans knew what he looked like, they went back to the pilot and froze the frame, and there he was, or there something very much like him was, crouched in the dark at the exact instant Fry's life was decided. Now, I have to be careful here because this is the one part of the story where the internet has spent 2 decades arguing, and the honest answer is that some of it is not settled. What is documented and what the people who made it have said plainly is that the Fry mystery was planned from the beginning. David X. Cohen, who ran the series alongside Groening, has described the arc as something they knew they were building toward, a long game laid down deliberately rather than reverse engineered later. That much is on the record. What is genuinely disputed, and I want to flag it as disputed rather than pretend I can settle it for you, is whether that shadow was visible in the very first broadcast in 1999, or whether it was added or sharpened in a later edit. The pilot was re-edited at one point for an unrelated reason. A background sign referencing a real person was changed after that person died, and some fans insist their original recordings show the shadow while others insist it appeared later. I am not going to tell you which is true, because I do not know, and neither does anyone shouting about it in a comment section. What I can tell you is the thing that actually matters, which is that the creators say the destination was fixed from the start. Whether the specific pixel of the shadow was there on night 1 or arrived a little later, the road always led to the same place. And that, to me, is almost more impressive than a perfectly planted clue would have been, because it means the writers were carrying the ending in their heads through 4 years of a network comedy that was being canceled underneath them, moved around the schedule, preempted by football, treated by Fox as disposable, and they still kept faith with a payoff most of the audience would not reach for years. Think about the discipline in that. You have a joke machine, a workplace cartoon about a delivery boy and a robot and a one-eyed spaceship captain, and buried inside it, you are secretly running a tragedy about a man whose whole life was taken from him by a benevolent conspiracy, and you are willing to wait half a decade to land it. Most shows cannot plan past next season. This one planned past its own death. Here's the structural trick that makes it work, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Futurama reveals the pieces of the Fry conspiracy in the opposite order from the order in which they happen. The shadow, the very first cause, the push, is shown to you first in the pilot before you can possibly understand it. Then, a little later, you meet Nibbler as a cute pet and have no idea he is the shadow. Then the enemy is introduced and Fry's strange immunity to it before you are told why he has that immunity. Then the reason for the immunity, the grandfather paradox, airs after the immunity itself has already been shown. And only right at the end, years in, does the story sit you down and explain the whole machine. at which point every earlier piece clicks backwards into place. You're handed the answer, then the clues, then the question, and finally the explanation in almost exactly the wrong sequence. And it works because each piece was designed to be satisfying on its own before you knew it was a piece. That is not how you write a normal mystery. A normal mystery lays out the question and marches toward the answer. Futurama scattered the answer across 4 years of unrelated comedy episodes, trusting that when the picture finally assembled itself in your head, the delay would make it land harder, not softer. And it does. When you finally understand the shadow, you do not just learn a fact, you retroactively refeel the entire pilot. The saddest thing that ever happened to Fry, the moment his old life ended, was on screen in front of you the whole time wearing the mask of a punchline. And the creature responsible was right there in the dark, and you laughed. That tells you something about the series itself. It hides its most sincere and most devastating material inside its jokes, and it trusts you to find it later or never. Some people watch all of Futurama and only ever see a chair tip over. The writers are fine with that. They planted the shadow for the ones who would come back and look. One more thing about the seeding before we move on, and it is about tone. The reason the shadow could hide in plain sight is that Futurama had trained you, by that point, to expect nothing beneath the surface of its opening minutes. The pilot is fast and funny and stuffed with throwaway gags, a suicide booth, a talking head in a jar, a robot who wants to end it all, a city built on top of the ruins of the old one. Your attention is deliberately overloaded. In a scene where a dozen strange things are happening at once and all of them are jokes, one more small strange thing does not register as a clue. It registers as more furniture. The writers use their own comedy as camouflage for their own tragedy. And I think that is the truest thing about the Fry conspiracy as a piece of storytelling before we even reach a single alien or brainwave. The disguise and the secret are made of the same material. The joke is the hiding place. To understand who pushed Fry, you have to meet the thing pretending to be a pet. And that means meeting the strangest and oldest race in the entire series. When Nibbler first arrives, he arrives as comic relief. He is a small black creature with 3 eyes, 2 of them huge and glossy and set in his face, and a third one that rides on a little stalk above them, and he is covered in soft dark fur, and he has an appetite completely out of proportion to his size. He eats things far larger than himself. He swallows animals whole. He is adopted by Leela, the ship's captain, as a pet, and for a long stretch of the series that is all he seems to be, a cute, greedy, bottomless little animal who happens to be around a lot. The joke is that this adorable thing eats like a black hole and produces, on the other end, a substance so heavy it is used to fuel starships. That is the whole gag on the surface, a pet whose droppings power the ship. Except every part of that is a clue, and the writers are telling you the truth the entire time while framing it as a joke. Because that heavy substance is dark matter, and here dark matter is not a background scientific term, it is the densest material in the universe. So dense that a single small ball of it weighs about as much as 1,000 suns, and it is the primary fuel that ships run on in the early seasons until a cheaper alternative eventually shows up. And the only known source of it, the only thing in existence that produces the densest substance there is this 1-foot-tall creature curled up on Leela's lap. Think about what that quietly implies. The cutest, least threatening character in the cast is a walking, breathing source of the densest matter in all of creation. Nothing about Nibbler is small except his body. His real name is Lord Nibbler, and he is a Nibblonian, one of a race of tiny aliens from a planet called Eternium, which sits at the center of the universe. The Nibblonians are, by the series' own account, the oldest race in existence. They were already here before almost everything else. Lord Nibbler in particular is said to have been born in the year 274 before the Common Era, which would make him well over 3,000 years old, and the writers play his age for a very specific kind of joke, the joke of an ancient cosmic being trapped in a form that everyone insists on treating as a house pet. There is a line about his true name, that it cannot really be pronounced, that in the time it would take to say a single letter of it, 1 trillion universes would flare into existence and collapse back into darkness. I love that as a piece of writing because it is doing 2 things at once. It is a joke about a pompous little alien, and it is a completely sincere statement about scale. This creature exists on a timeline so long that human history is a rounding error inside it. And that is the being that decided Fry's fate. Not a machine, not a random cosmic force, but a person, an extremely old, extremely deliberate person who looked at all of human history and picked out one delivery boy. Once you know that Nibbler is a Nibblonian and not a pet, the entire texture of his scenes changes in retrospect. Every time he is on Leela's lap, apparently dozing, he is watching. Every time the crew treats him as a dumb animal, he is letting them because his cover depends on it. He spends years living inside the very group of people whose lives he has secretly rearranged, eating from their table, being carried around like luggage, and none of them, Fry included, has any idea the little animal is the reason Fry is 1,000 years from home. That is one of the coldest long cons in television, and it is hiding inside a character designed to make children go awe. The Nibblonians as a whole are worth understanding because they reframe the entire conflict. They are not warriors in any way that looks like war. They are tiny, they are soft, they are physically unimposing to the point of comedy, but they are the guardians of the universe, and they have been for as long as it has existed, and their weapon of choice is not force, it is knowledge and patience and manipulation. They watch, they wait, they calculate across spans of time no other species could hold in their heads. And when they need something done, they do not fight for it directly. They arrange for it to be done, often by someone who does not know they are doing it. That is the Nibblonian method in a single image. A 3,000-year-old being disguised as a pet, sitting on the lap of a woman who has no idea, next to a man whose whole existence they engineered, waiting for the exact right moment to reveal a truth they have been holding for 1,000 years. There is a detail here I keep circling back to, which is that third eye on the stalk. It is easy to read it as just a funny design, a cartoon alien with an extra eye, but there is something almost thematically perfect about it in a race whose entire role is watching. The Nibblonians see more than other beings. They see further, they see longer, they see the shape of threats that have not arrived yet. The third eye rides on a stalk so it can look over things, around things, above the ordinary line of sight. And that is exactly what they do with Fry. They saw, before anyone else could, that a specific human born in the 20th century was going to matter to the fate of everything, and they arranged the universe accordingly, and then they watched, for 1,000 years, through that patient extra eye to make sure it played out. I said the disguise and the secret are made of the same material, and Nibbler is the clearest proof of it anywhere in the story. His cuteness is not a contradiction to his importance, it is the mechanism of it. If he looked like a cosmic guardian, everyone would treat him like one, and the deception would fall apart. Because he looks like a pet, he can go anywhere, hear anything, and be underestimated by everyone, which is exactly what a spy who has to live inside his target's home for years needs. Futurama dressed its oldest, most powerful, most morally complicated character in the least threatening body it could design, and let you carry him around and let you love him for years before it told you what he had done. When you finally learn the truth, you cannot even hate him cleanly because you have spent seasons finding him adorable. That is not an accident either. Nothing about Nibbler is an accident. That is more or less his entire point. So if Nibbler is the guardian, what is he guarding against, and why does it need a pizza boy? To answer that, you have to meet the enemy, and the enemy is the strangest thing in the whole mythology, because it is not evil the way a monster is evil. It is evil the way a filing cabinet is evil, if the filing cabinet wanted to end everything. The enemy is a race called the Brain Spawn, sometimes written as one word, sometimes as two, and they are giant floating brains. That is the literal shape of them, enormous wrinkled disembodied brains drifting through space, each one large enough to fill a room with a single central eye. They came into being, we are told, milliseconds after the Big Bang, which puts them in the same impossible age bracket as the Nibblonians, and the two races have been at war with each other since the very beginning of the universe. That is worth pausing on. The central conflict of Futurama, the thing the whole Fry story is secretly about, is a war older than every star, older than every planet, older than time as anything living could measure it, between the oldest guardians and the oldest destroyers. And it has been running quietly in the background of a comedy about a delivery company the entire time. Now here is where the brain spawn become truly unsettling, because their goal is not what you would expect from a cosmic villain. They do not want to rule the universe. They do not want to enslave it or burn it or feed on it. What they want is to know it, completely. Their plan is to catalog every single piece of information that exists anywhere, every fact, every memory, every equation, every song, every thought, and store all of it inside a vast biological memory bank called the infosphere. And then, once they have collected everything, once the record is complete, they intend to destroy the universe. Not out of malice, but out of a kind of horrible logic. Because as long as the universe exists, new information keeps being created, new events keep happening, new things keep being thought and made and discovered, which means their catalog can never be finished, never be perfect, never be complete. The only way to have total knowledge of everything is to stop everything, freeze the record, and end the flow of new events forever. They want to destroy all of existence so their encyclopedia will finally be done. I find that one of the more disturbing motivations any cartoon has ever handed a villain, because it is not stupid. It is not the ranting of a madman. It is a perfectly coherent conclusion drawn from a single obsessive premise, that knowledge should be complete. Take that premise seriously enough, follow it far enough, refuse to let anything else matter, and you arrive exactly where the brain spawn arrive, at the idea that the universe is a problem because it keeps producing more universe to know. They are what happens when the desire to understand everything curdles into the desire to stop everything. And there is something almost sad underneath the horror of it, because you can see how a mind might get there. Anyone who has ever wanted to finish a thing, to have it complete and settled and done, understands the pull on some small level of the thought that the only truly finished thing is a dead one. Their weapon fits the theme perfectly. The brain spawn attack by making everyone around them stupid. They emit a kind of field, a stupefying wave that lowers the intelligence of every mind it touches, dropping thoughts, scrambling reasoning, reducing clever beings to drooling confusion. It is the ideal weapon for a race that worships information because they do not kill you, they simply empty you. They turn the minds around them into blank pages so theirs can be the only one still writing. And it works on everything. Every living creature, every robot, every plant, every thinking thing in the universe is vulnerable to it because the weapon works through a specific channel that all of those minds share. That channel is going to matter enormously in a moment, because it is the exact thing Fry does not have. The leader of the brain spawn is called the Big Brain, and it lives inside the infosphere itself, at the center of the whole collection, the largest of them, the one running the plan. And I want to keep this straight because Futurama has more than one giant menacing sphere in it, and people mix them up. The infosphere and the brain spawn are not the same thing as a certain other death sphere that turns up in an unrelated episode about a censorship satellite. That other sphere is its own separate joke with its own separate story. The brain spawn, the big brain, and the infosphere are the cosmic war thread, the thread that runs all the way back to the Big Bang and all the way forward to Fry. Keep them in their own box. So now you can see the shape of the war. On one side, the Nibblonians, tiny and ancient and patient, defenders of the universe, whose whole method is watching and waiting and arranging. On the other, the brain spawn, giant and ancient and patient, destroyers of the universe whose whole method is collecting and emptying and ending. Both older than everything, both playing a game measured in eons. And for most of that eternal war, it has apparently been a stalemate, or something close to it, because both sides are ancient and neither has been able to finish the other, which raises the question the entire Fry conspiracy exists to answer. If the war has gone on since the beginning of time with no winner, what changed? What did the Nibblonians find that could finally tip it? What weapon could possibly work against an enemy that can read and control and stupefy every mind in existence? The answer is a mind it cannot touch, a single being, somewhere in all of creation, whose thoughts the brain spawn cannot read, whose intelligence their weapon cannot lower, whom they cannot see coming and cannot control and cannot understand because he is missing the one thing every other mind in the universe has. The Nibblonians spent who knows how long looking for such a being, and they found exactly one, born in the 20th century on a small blue planet, working a dead-end job delivering pizza. That is why the Guardian of the Universe disguised himself as a pet and pushed a delivery boy into a freezer, because that delivery boy was the only gun that could be fired at the oldest enemy that has ever existed. We should talk about what exactly is missing from his head. The first time the story pulls the curtain back even a little is in an episode called The Day the Earth Stood Stupid, which carries the production code 3ACV07 and aired on the 18th of February 2001. The teleplay is credited to Jeff Westbrook, the story to Westbrook and David X. Cohen, and it is directed by Mark Irvin. On the surface, it is a comedy about a dog show and a stupid planet, but it is the half hour where the brain spawn arrive on Earth and the mask slips off Nibbler for the first time. The brain spawn come, and they do exactly what they do. They blanket the planet in their stupefying field, and one by one, every mind on Earth goes dark. The smartest people become idiots. Machines stop making sense. The whole population is reduced to blank confusion because the weapon works on every mind that carries the thing all minds carry. And then, in the middle of all this collapsing intelligence, one person is standing there completely unaffected. Fry, the dumbest guy in the room, the delivery boy who cannot do his job, the man everyone treats as a lovable idiot, is the only human being on Earth whose mind the brain spawn cannot touch. While geniuses drool, he is exactly as clever as he always was, which is to say, not very, but crucially unchanged. The weapon slides right off him. And this is the joke that turns out not to be a joke, the one the whole conspiracy is built on. Fry's stupidity is a superpower. For years you are invited to laugh at how dim he is, and then it quietly turns out that the very quality you were laughing at is the thing that makes him matter more than anyone in the universe. Because the brain spawn cannot lower an intelligence they cannot read, and they cannot read Fry, and so the one man too foolish to be worth anything is the one man their weapon fails against. There is a real tenderness in that idea if you let it land. This notion that the thing about yourself you are most ashamed of, the thing everyone dismisses you for, might be exactly the thing the universe secretly needs. Futurama makes this move more than once, but this is the first and clearest time. It takes its saddest running joke, that Fry is a nobody who is not good at anything, and reveals that his nobodiness has a shape, and the shape is a key. It is in this same episode that Nibbler reveals himself. In the middle of the crisis, the cute pet stands up and speaks, and the crew learns the little animal they have been carrying around is an intelligent being, a Nibblonian, an ambassador, and a soldier in a war none of them knew about. He drops the act briefly because the stakes require it, and he guides Fry because Fry is the weapon and Nibbler is the one who has been guarding the weapon all along. The plan is to use Fry's immune mind to get close to the big brain, and it works in a very Futurama way. Fry does not defeat the leader of an eternal cosmic race with a weapon or a clever scheme. He defeats it by trapping it inside a book he writes, a deliberately, catastrophically badly written book, a story so incoherent and so poorly constructed that the brain, pulled inside its narrative, cannot find a logical way out. The mind that wants to catalog all of existence gets stuck inside a plot that does not make sense, because a bad enough story has no exit. I think that is a wonderful thing for a show made by writers to believe that the ultimate defense against a being that wants to organize all knowledge is a piece of writing so bad it cannot be organized at all. But here's the part that changes everything about how you watch the rest of the series, and it is a mechanic I need to explain now because it comes back again and again. At the end of the encounter, the memory of it is erased. The Nibblonians wipe it. The crew does not walk away carrying the knowledge that Nibbler is an ancient alien and Fry is the chosen weapon of a cosmic war. They forget. Their minds are cleaned of the whole thing, and Nibbler goes back to being a pet, and Fry goes back to being an idiot, and the war goes back underground. This is the thing you really have to understand about how the Fry conspiracy is told, because it means the characters do not know what you know. The audience is allowed to accumulate the truth across the years, but the people inside the story keep having it taken away from them. Fry learns he is special and then forgets. He learns why and then forgets. The tragedy is not only that the conspiracy happened to him, it is that he is not even allowed to keep the knowledge of it. That his own significance keeps being confiscated from his memory the moment he glimpses it. That memory erasure is doing something quietly cruel, and I do not think Futurama gets enough credit for how cruel it is. Imagine being told, once, that you matter more than anyone else alive, that your entire life had a purpose, that the thing everyone mocks you for is actually the reason the universe still exists, and then having that knowledge wiped and going back to your small life believing you are nothing again, and then it happening a second time. Fry is a man who is repeatedly handed the meaning of his own existence and repeatedly has it erased before he can hold on to it. When people talk about Futurama burying real sadness under comedy, this is one of the deepest examples, and it is structural, built into the machinery of how the plot works. The reset button is not lazy writing here. The reset button is the wound. So after that first encounter, this is where things stand. You, the viewer, now know that Fry is immune to the brain spawn, that his stupidity is a shield, that Nibbler is not a pet, and that a cosmic war exists. What you do not know yet, what the writers have deliberately withheld, is why. Why is Fry immune? Every other mind in the universe has the thing the brain spawn exploit. What is different about this one man from the 20th century? You have been shown the effect and denied the cause, and you are going to be made to wait most of a year for the answer, and when it comes, it will not arrive as an explanation of the brainwave at all. It will come disguised as a completely different episode, a time travel farce about aliens and a crashed spaceship, and you will not even realize, the first time you watch it, that you have just been handed the missing piece. Before we get to the cause, let me slow down and be precise about the thing itself, the missing piece inside Fry's head, because it is the hinge the entire conspiracy turns on, and it is easy to get slightly wrong. Futurama calls it the Delta brainwave. Every living thing has it. Not just humans, not just animals, but everything with a mind, robots included, plants included. Every thinking or half-thinking thing in the entire universe carries this one particular brainwave. It is described as a completely universal trait, so ordinary and so total that no one would ever think to notice it, in the same way you do not notice that you have a pulse until someone tells you what it means. And the brain spawn use it as their doorway. The delta brainwave is the channel through which they see minds, read minds, control minds, and stupefy minds. It is the frequency they broadcast on and receive on. If you have the delta brainwave, and you do, and I do, and every creature in the story does, then you are visible to them, legible to them, vulnerable to them. Your thoughts can be read. Your intelligence can be switched off. You can be found. Fry does not have it. That is the whole thing. There is one mind in all of existence missing this universal brainwave, and it belongs to a pizza delivery boy from the 20th century. And because he is missing it, he is, to the brain spawn, not so much hidden as simply not there. They cannot read him because there is nothing to read on their frequency. They cannot control him because the wire they use to reach into other minds does not connect to his. They cannot stupefy him because the switch they flip is not installed in his head. And they cannot even really perceive him, cannot anticipate him, cannot see him coming, because from their point of view, a mind without a delta brainwave is a hole in the world, a blank spot where a person should be. Fry can walk right up to the oldest enemy in the universe, and it will not know he is there until he is already doing something about it. Think about how elegant that is as a piece of design, because it solves the problem the entire mythology sets up. You have an enemy that can read and control and dumb down every mind in existence. How on earth do you fight something like that? Any strategist you send, the brain spawn read his plan out of his head before he arrives. Any genius you build, the brain spawn switch off. Any army you raise, the brain spawn turn into a field of drooling confusion before it fires a shot. There is no clever mind that can beat them because cleverness runs on the exact channel they own. The one thing that can beat them is a mind they cannot access at all, and the only such mind, the one exception in all of creation, happens to be attached to the least clever person imaginable. The universe's ultimate weapon against the smartest possible enemy is its dumbest possible man, and that is not a contradiction, it is the solution. His emptiness is his invisibility, and Futurama wants you to feel the irony of it fully, so it keeps Fry an idiot. It never lets his cosmic importance make him competent. He does not become a hero in the ordinary sense. He does not get smart. He does not rise to the occasion the way a normal chosen one does. He remains, throughout, a well-meaning fool who eats old sandwiches he finds on the floor and cannot hold down a simple job and is bad at almost everything he tries. His specialness and his uselessness are the same fact viewed from two directions. The thing that makes him worthless in every ordinary human measure, his lack of a sharp, readable, calculating mind, is precisely the thing that makes him priceless in the one measure that matters more than any other in the whole universe. I keep circling back to how gentle that idea is underneath the comedy, because so much of the heart of Futurama lives right there. It looks at its most hopeless character and says, the world dismisses you, and the world is wrong, and someday the exact thing they mocked will be the only thing that can save them all. Now the writers are careful, and I want to match their care. They do not explain the delta brainwave to you all at once, and they do not, at the moment they first reveal Fry's immunity, tell you why he is missing it. In that first brain spawn episode, you see the effect, the immunity, with no account of the cause. The word for the brainwave, the full mechanism, the reason, all of that gets parceled out later. For a long stretch, you simply know that Fry is somehow special, somehow immune, and you file it away as one of those things a cartoon does. The cause is going to arrive from a completely unexpected direction, and it is going to be a genuine time travel paradox rather than a mutation or an accident or a science fiction injection. And when it lands, it retroactively makes the missing brainwave the strangest and most specific chosen one origin in television, because Fry is not special because of what was done to him. He is special because of what he did to himself 1,000 years before he was born, by his own hand, without meaning to. There is one load-bearing fact people get wrong all the time. The missing delta brainwave is not caused by the freezing. Being frozen for 1,000 years did not scramble his head or erase a brainwave. The ice has nothing to do with it. It is also not radiation, not a lab accident, not some cosmic ray he caught in space. The cause is one specific thing and one specific thing only, and it is the most personal, tangled, darkly funny origin the story could possibly have chosen. Fry lacks the delta brainwave because of who his grandfather is, and who his grandfather is turns out to be the purest Futurama answer in the entire series, because his grandfather is him. The episode is called Roswell That Ends Well. Its production code is 3ACV19, and it aired on the 9th of December 2001, which is one of those places where the numbering gets slippery, because depending on which system a website uses, you will see it filed as a Season 3 episode or a Season 4 episode. Do not let that trip you up. Anchor to the title and the year. Roswell, That Ends Well, December 2001. It is, by a lot of measures, the best-loved single-episode Futurama ever made, and it is the one that quietly supplies the missing cause for everything we have been talking about, even though on the night it aired, almost nobody watching it understood that is what it was doing. Here is what happens. The Planet Express crew is out in space, and Fry, being Fry, puts a bag of popcorn in a microwave oven right as the ship is passing through the light of a supernova. The combination of the radiation and the microwaves and the gravity does something no one intends. It opens a hole in time, and the ship is thrown backward through it, and when the crew comes out the other side, they are over the New Mexico desert in the year 1947 in a place called Roswell. The ship crashes. Bender, the robot, comes apart in the crash, his body scattered, his head left lying in the sand. And the United States military, in that same year, in that same place, recovers a crashed craft and strange debris and a metal head, which is the show's cheerfully ridiculous explanation for the best-known real-world UFO legend there is. That alone would be a good episode. But the time travel is not the joke. The time travel is the delivery system for something far more personal, because among the soldiers at the base is a young man named Enos, and Enos, it turns out, is Fry's grandfather, his actual biological grandfather, young, alive, decades before Fry will be born. And the professor, the ancient scientist who runs Planet Express and who is, incidentally, Fry's own distant descendant, warns Fry in the sternest possible terms not to interfere with Enos, because if anything happens to your own grandfather in the past, you might erase your own existence. This is the oldest rule in time travel fiction, the grandfather paradox, stated by name, laid out like a warning label. Do not let your grandfather die before he fathers your parent, or you will never be born. Fry naturally takes this exactly as seriously as Fry takes everything, which is to say he immediately becomes so obsessed with protecting Enos that he smothers the man, keeps him from every possible danger, will not let him do anything, and in the course of frantically shielding his grandfather from all harm, Fry accidentally traps him alone in a house sitting in the middle of a nuclear weapons testing range, and the bomb goes off and Enos is killed. Fry kills his own grandfather. The one thing he was told he must never do, he does, out of an excess of trying to prevent it. And now, the logic of the episode does something almost wicked. Fry reasons, in his own Fry way, that since he himself still exists, still standing right there, not erased from time, then the dead man could not really have been his grandfather after all. The professor said, killing your grandfather erases you. Fry is not erased. Therefore, Fry concludes, Enos was not truly his grandfather. The old man must have been mistaken about the family tree, and there's no longer any danger. Which leaves one loose end. Enos had a fiancée, a young woman named Mildred, who is now grieving and alone. And Fry, having decided this woman is a stranger, unconnected to his bloodline, comforts her, and one thing leads to another, and Fry sleeps with Mildred. And the next morning, the professor puts it together and explains with appropriate horror what Fry has actually done. Enos was never going to be Fry's grandfather in the way that mattered. By killing Enos and then sleeping with his fiancée, Fry has fathered his own father. Mildred is Fry's grandmother, and Fry is his own grandfather. The child they conceived that night grows up to be Fry's dad. Fry is his own ancestor. The loop is closed, and it is not a mistake in the timeline, it is the timeline. Fry was always his own grandfather. He always had to go back to that desert because he had already been there, because that is where his father came from. Now settle into the structure of that for a moment because it is a proper closed loop, the kind time travel stories usually avoid because it makes people's heads hurt. There is no version of events where Fry has a different grandfather and then becomes his own by accident. The paradox is stable. It always happened. Fry's father was always the son of Fry and Mildred, which means Fry's very existence depends on Fry at some point traveling back in time to become his own grandfather. He is a person who could not exist unless he first became his own ancestor, a loop with no beginning, a man who fathered the line that produced him. Futurama treats this not as an error to be corrected, but as a simple, if deeply strange fact of who Fry is. He is his own grandfather. It is written into his family tree in a way that bends back into itself. And the reason this matters, the reason this episode is secretly the keystone of the whole Fry conspiracy, and not just a brilliant standalone comedy, is that being your own grandfather does something to your genetics. A normal person inherits their genes from 2 separate grandfathers and grandmothers, 4 distinct people whose material mixes down through 2 parents. Fry's family tree is folded. Because he is his own grandfather, his genetic inheritance is scrambled in a way no ordinary person's is, and the specific result of that scrambling, we are told later, is that Fry was born without the delta brainwave. The universal brainwave every other living thing has, the one the brain spawn exploit, simply did not form in him because the closed loop of his ancestry produced a mind assembled differently from every other mind in existence. That is why he is immune. Not radiation, not the freezing, not a mutation, a time travel paradox of his own making. He erased his own delta brainwave by becoming his own grandfather, which means, and this is the part that gets me, that the origin of the universe's only weapon is an accident that is also not an accident, a mistake Fry made that he was always going to make, a self-inflicted genetic quirk with no author but himself. Nobody engineered his immunity. The Nibblonians did not give it to him, the brain spawn did not cause it. Fry did it to himself by his own dumb hand in a desert in 1947 while trying to do the opposite. The single biological fact the entire cosmic war depends on was created by a delivery boy, microwaving popcorn and then panicking about his grandfather. The universe's salvation traces back to the clumsiest, least competent thing a person could possibly do, and it had to happen. It was written into time from the start. One real-world note, because it belongs here. Roswell That Ends Well won the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program in the under 1 hour category at the 2002 ceremony. It is the only episode from Futurama's original Fox run to take that particular award. So the episode that secretly holds the entire Fry mythology together is also, by the industry's own measure, the finest single thing the original run produced. The keystone and the crown jewel are the same episode, and most of the people handing it that award almost certainly had no idea it was doing double duty as the hidden engine of a conspiracy that would not be fully explained for another year and a half. And so we arrive at the episode where Futurama finally sits Fry down and sits you down and tells the whole truth. It is called The Why of Fry. Its production code is 4ACV10. It aired on the 6th of April, 2003. It was written by David X. Cohen, the man who had been carrying this ending in his head since before the first episode aired, and it was directed by Wes Archer. You will sometimes see it labeled under a different season number depending on the broadcast counting, but the title and the year are what to hold. This is the payoff. This is where 4 years of shadows and pets and brainwaves and time travel finally lock together into a single picture, and it is worth taking slowly because the way it delivers the reveal is as important as the reveal itself. The episode opens on Fry at his lowest. He feels useless. This is the through line of his whole character, remember? The sad running joke that he is a nobody, that he contributes nothing, that the crew would be exactly the same without him. He watches Leela, the woman he loves, seem to prefer the company of literally anyone else, even Bender the robot, and he sinks into the conviction that he does not matter, that the universe would not notice if he simply were not there. And that is the exact moment, the moment he decides he is worthless, that the Nibblonians come for him. Nibbler knocks him out and spirits him away to Eternium, the planet at the center of the universe, and there, surrounded by the whole ancient race of guardians, Fry is finally told what he is. They tell him he is the Mighty One. They tell him about the war with the brain spawn, the war older than the stars. They tell him about the Delta brainwave, that every mind has it and his does not, and that this makes him the one being in all of existence the enemy cannot read or control or fight. They tell him he is missing the brainwave because he is his own grandfather. And in that one sentence, the story connects Roswell to the brainwave to the war, cause to effect to purpose, right in front of him. And then they give him his mission. The brain spawn have rebuilt the infosphere, the great memory bank where they mean to store all knowledge before ending the universe. And Fry, and only Fry, can get close enough to destroy it because he is the only mind they cannot detect. The useless delivery boy, on the day he decides he is nothing, is told that he alone is indispensable, the one weapon in a war for all of existence. It is the chosen one speech, and Futurama earns it precisely because it spent 4 years making you believe this man was the opposite of chosen. So Fry goes, he infiltrates the infosphere, invisible to the enemy, exactly as designed, and he plants the device that will destroy it. And this is where the show does the thing that turns a clever science fiction payoff into something that aches. Because while Fry is inside, the brain spawn, sensing something is wrong even if they cannot see him, show him images. They pull footage from the past to try to understand what is happening. And in doing so, they show Fry and show us the one thing Fry never knew. They show him the night he was frozen. And there, in the replayed footage of December 31st, 1999, Fry watches from the outside as his own past self leans back in that chair, and he sees for the first time that he did not fall. He sees Nibbler. He sees the little creature reach out and tip the chair. He sees that the defining tragedy of his life, the accident that took him from his family and his century and everyone he ever loved and threw him 1,000 years into the future, was not an accident at all. It was done to him, on purpose, by the being who has been sleeping on his friend's lap this whole time. I think this is the emotional center of the entire conspiracy, and it is worth being still with it because everything in the mythology has been building toward this single realization, and Futurama does not flinch from how much it hurts. Fry's whole life in the future, everything, meeting Leela, joining Planet Express, every friend he has made, every good thing, is built on a foundation of theft. He was stolen from his own time. And the theft was not random cosmic bad luck he could make peace with. It was a decision made by someone he trusted, someone he loved, who then watched him grieve his lost life for years and said nothing. Fry confronts Nibbler right there, and the confrontation is the moral heart of the whole thing. He is not angry that the universe needs saving. He is angry about the deception. Why, he asks, did you not simply ask me? If I am so important, if I am the only one who can do this, why did you have to take my entire life away without telling me? Why did you have to let me think it was my fault? Why could you not have just asked? And Nibbler's answer is the most honest and damning thing in the episode. He says they were afraid he would refuse, that if they had asked, Fry might have said no, might have chosen his own small life and his own family over a war he did not understand. And they could not take that risk because what, Nibbler asks, is one life weighed against the entire universe? And there it is. That is the whole ethical knot of the Fry conspiracy in a single exchange, and the series is far too smart to resolve it for you. Nibbler is not lying. It is genuinely true that Fry, asked as a young man in 1999 to give up everything he had for a cosmic war he had no way to comprehend, might well have said no, and the universe might have ended. And it is also entirely true that they treated a person as a tool, that they made the biggest decision of his life for him and hid it from him for 1,000 years, that they weighed his consent as an acceptable loss. Both of those things are true at once, and the show lets them both stand. The resolution is quiet and strange and a little heartbreaking. Fry, now knowing everything, chooses to complete his mission anyway. He destroys the infosphere, and more than that, he understands now that he has to make sure his own past self still gets frozen. Because if he does not, if he interferes to save his younger self from that tube, then he never comes to the future, never becomes the weapon, and the universe is lost. So Fry, of his own free will, this time with full knowledge, ensures that the terrible thing that was done to him still happens. He closes his own loop. Having learned that his life was stolen, he chooses to let it be stolen because now he understands what it was for. That is an extraordinary thing to ask of a character, and Futurama asks it, and Fry does it, and it may be the bravest thing he ever does, precisely because it costs him the one thing he might have wanted more than anything, the chance to go back and never lose his old life at all. And then Nibbler wipes his memory. Again, Fry does not get to keep any of it. He does not get to remember that he is the mighty one, does not get to remember that he saved the universe, does not get to remember that his best friend's pet betrayed him for the greater good, does not even get to remember that he chose, freely and heroically, to accept his own fate. All of it is taken from his mind and he is sent home, but the Nibblonians let him keep one small thing. Nibbler sends him back with a flower, a single flower, to give to Leela. Fry returns from having saved all of existence, remembering none of it, holding a flower he does not fully understand the meaning of, and gives it to the woman he loves. He saved everything, and all he gets to keep is a small, kind gesture toward one person, and he does not even know why. If you want to understand what kind of show Futurama is underneath the robots and the jokes, it is that. The reward for saving the universe is a flower and no memory of having earned it. We have been talking about the conspiracy as a cosmic thing, a war older than stars, a chosen weapon, an infosphere, and all of that is true. But I want to bring it down to the ground now because the price of this whole plan was not paid in cosmic terms. It was paid by one man losing everything small and ordinary and precious that he had. Nibbler did not just move a piece on a board. He took Fry away from a mother, a father, a brother, a girlfriend, a dog, a whole life. And Futurama, to its enormous credit, made sure you felt every one of those losses before it ever told you they were the cost of anything. Start with the brother. There is an episode called The Luck of the Fryrish, production code 3ACV04, from the same run as Roswell, and it is one of the saddest half hours the show ever produced, and on its surface it has nothing to do with cosmic wars at all. It is about Fry missing his family. Fry remembers, from his childhood in the 20th century, a lucky 7-leaf clover he found as a boy and treasured, and he remembers his older brother Yancey, who he believes spent their whole childhood copying him, stealing his things, taking his identity, even wanting his name. Fry, now 1,000 years in the future, goes looking for that clover, digs into the ruins of old New York to find where he hid it, and discovers along the way the truth about his brother, and the truth breaks your heart. Yancey did not steal from Fry out of spite. After Fry vanished, after he disappeared on New Year's Eve and never came back and the family had no idea he had been frozen, Yancey grieved him. And when Yancey had a son of his own, he named that son Philip J. Fry, after the little brother he had lost, so the name would live on, so there would still be a Philip J. Fry in the world. The clover, the accomplishments, the name Fry thought had been stolen from him, were all carried forward by a brother who loved him and missed him and wanted to keep a piece of him alive. Fry finds this out standing over the evidence of a life that went on without him, a life he was torn out of. And there is nothing cosmic about the grief of it. It is just a man realizing how loved he was by people he will never see again. Now think about what the conspiracy does to that episode in retrospect. When you first watch The Luck of the Fryrish, Fry's loss feels like tragedy of the ordinary kind, the sadness of a man displaced by an accident of fate. But once you know the truth, once you know Nibbler pushed him, that grief acquires an author. Yancey did not lose his brother to bad luck. He lost his brother because a cosmic intelligence decided that Fry mattered more as a weapon than as a son and a sibling. Every year, the Fry family spent wondering what happened to their boy, every birthday Yancey marked by looking at his own son and thinking of the brother he was named for. All of that mourning was the deliberate output of a plan. The Nibblonians did not just take Fry from his time. They inflicted a permanent absence on everyone who loved him, and they did it knowingly, and they judged it acceptable. The Luck of the Fryrish is the invoice for the conspiracy, itemized in the currency of a real family's grief, and the series made you pay attention to it years before it told you who signed for the charge. Then there is the mother, and for that we have to jump forward in time, past the original cancellation, past the films, to the series' Comedy Central era, to an episode called Game of Tones, which aired on the 14th of August, 2013. This one loops directly back to the night of the freezing, and it is one of the gentlest, most devastating things the Revive show ever did. The setup is a mysterious tone, a sound Fry cannot place but cannot shake, and to trace it he has to relive the events of December 31st, 1999, going back into a reconstruction of that final day of his old life. And in tracing the tone, Futurama fills in another piece of the conspiracy. The sound turns out to have come from Nibbler's ship, the parking signal of the very craft that brought the creature to Earth to do the deed. And there is a character named Digby, Nibbler's chauffeur, who confirms it directly, that he drove Nibbler to Earth that night for the express purpose of making sure Fry ended up in the tube. So the machinery of the freezing gets one more turn of detail. There was a ship, there was a driver, it was a scheduled operation. The most spontaneous-looking accident in the show was, we learn again, an appointment. But that is not what makes Game of Tones hurt. What makes it hurt is that in going back to that day, Fry gets to see his mother. He gets to be in the house one more time, on the last day, with the family he lost, and above all with his mom, who loved him, who is going about an ordinary day with no idea it is the last one, that her son is about to vanish for 1,000 years. And the Nibblonians, in a rare gesture of something like mercy, allow Fry a moment with her. Inside a dream, inside the reconstruction, Fry gets to speak to his mother one last time, to have the goodbye the freezing stole from him, the goodbye no one on either side ever got to have because from the family's point of view, he simply disappeared. It is offered as a gift, and it is a real gift. It is a kind thing, and it is also, if you think about who is giving it, one of the strangest apologies in television, because it is the people who engineered his loss, handing him a small taste of what they took, as though that could balance the ledger. Here they seem to say, you cannot have your life back, you cannot have your family back, you cannot have your century back, but you can have a few minutes with your mother in a dream. It is tender and it is heartbreaking, and it cannot undo a single thing. I keep thinking about the arithmetic of it, the way Futurama steadfastly refuses to let the cosmic scale erase the human one. Nibbler's defense, back in The Why of Fry, was to set one life against the whole universe. And on a scale that big, one life obviously loses. Of course you sacrifice one delivery boy to save all of existence. Any rational calculus says so. But Futurama will not let you leave it there because it keeps showing you what that one life actually contained. A brother who named his son after you. A mother going about an ordinary morning who will spend the rest of her days not knowing what happened to her boy. A clover hidden in a childhood you can never return to. When Nibbler weighs one life against everything, the series answers, very patiently, over the course of years, by showing you exactly how much is inside a single life, and letting you decide whether the math is really as easy as he made it sound. That, more than any brainwave or infosphere, is the actual subject of the Fry conspiracy. It is a story about the cost of deciding that a person is worth less than a purpose. When Fox canceled Futurama, the story of Fry was not finished, and the way it came back is its own small piece of the conspiracy, because the first of the 4 films, the show returned with Doug straight back into the loop of Fry's time travel, and pulled out a version of him you will not forget. The film is called Bender's Big Score. It was released on the 27th of November, 2007, written by Ken Keeler, one of the show's most mathematically inclined writers, and directed by Dwayne Carey Hill. It is a time travel story, densely, dizzyingly so, the kind of plot that rewards a diagram and buried in the middle of all its paradoxes is a secretly sorrowful character Futurama rarely gets credit for, a man named Lars. The engine of the film is a time travel code, a string that, tattooed onto a person's body, allows travel into the past. A group of alien scammers, led by one called Nudar, get hold of this code and use it to loot history, and along the way the code lands, of all places, tattooed on the backside of Fry under his hair, discovered when he scratches. The plot spins outward from there into a tangle of duplicates and doublings, because that is what time travel of this kind produces: copies. And here's the piece that matters for Fry's story. At one point, Fry, fleeing the chaos, uses the time code to escape into the past, back to the early 2000s, back toward his own original era. And when a person travels back using this code, the timeline produces a duplicate, a second version of that person who is left behind in the past while the story goes on. Fry becomes 2. One returns to the future. The other stays behind in the early 21st century, alone, in the wrong time, cut off. That stranded duplicate is Lars. He lives out years in the past, or rather in a displaced stretch of time, and life is not kind to him. He is injured, scarred, his hair is lost, he ages, and he grows into a quieter, sadder, more grown-up version of Fry, a man shaped by loneliness and hardship into someone almost unrecognizable as the goofy delivery boy. He takes the name Lars Fillmore, and when the timeline brings him into contact with the future again, with Planet Express, with Leela, something extraordinary and heartbreaking happens. Lars and Leela fall in love. Leela, who has spent years unable to quite let herself love Fry, falls for Lars, this calmer, wiser, wounded man, without anyone knowing for most of the film, that Lars is Fry. He is the same person she cannot commit to, aged and softened by suffering into the version of himself she can finally love. They very nearly marry, and the tragedy sitting under that romance is almost unbearable once you understand it. Leela did not fall out of love with Fry and into love with someone else. She fell in love with what Fry could become if he grew up, and that person was still Fry, and she never got to have him because of what Lars turns out to have to do. Because Lars, in the end, dies. When Nudar threatens everything, it is Lars, the duplicate, the stranded older Fry, who sacrifices himself to stop him. He gives his life, and in doing so, he reveals the truth of who he is, and the reveal lands like a hammer because Leela realizes that the man she loved and lost was the man she already had all along, aged into the person she wanted and now dead. Lars is not a character who gets to survive and become a recurring figure. He is a doomed branch of Fry, a glimpse of the grown man Fry might have been, killed off inside the same film that introduced him. And it matters to hold on to the fact that he is dead, permanently, a closed door, not a version of Fry waiting somewhere to come back. He was a paradox given a few years of life and a name and a love story, and then folded back out of existence. I find Lars the saddest figure the film's ever produced, honestly, precisely because he is proof of the better man Fry had it in him to become, shown to us just long enough to be taken away and grieved. And then the film does the thing that makes it part of the larger conspiracy rather than a standalone tragedy. And it is the kind of move Ken Keeler specialized in, a loop that closes so tightly it makes your head hurt in the good way. Remember the time code, the tattoo. Where did it come from? How did the code get into the timeline in the first place? The answer is that Bender, the robot, travels back in time, all the way back to the frozen Fry, to Fry asleep in his cryogenic tube in the year 2000. and tattoos the time code onto him there, on his backside, under the hair, while he sleeps in the ice, which means the code Fry carries in the future, the code that starts the whole plot, was put there by Bender traveling back using, ultimately, that same code. It is a closed loop with no origin, exactly like Fry being his own grandfather. The tattoo has no first cause. It exists because it exists. Bender puts it on the frozen Fry so that future Fry will have it, so that the events happen, so that Bender goes back to put it on the frozen Fry. And so the man asleep in the tube, the man Nibbler pushed there in 1999, gets marked again in his sleep, a second secret written onto his frozen body while he dreams through 1,000 years. Unknowing. I love that Futurama keeps doing this to Fry specifically, keeps making him the site of these seamless closed loops. He is his own grandfather. He carries a tattoo he was always going to carry because a friend went back to give it to him. He ensures his own freezing so he can become the weapon that saves the universe. Fry, the man who cannot hold down a job, who is dismissed as an idiot by everyone around him, is somehow the linchpin of the tightest time travel logic in the entire series, the fixed point around which these impossible loops all bend. The universe treats him as disposable and the plot treats him as load-bearing, and that gap is the whole joke and the whole heart of him. Nothing in the timeline works without Fry, and Fry has no idea. There is one more thread worth pulling on in Bender's big score, and it is about Nibbler, because the little guardian is in this film too, still watching, still present, still folded into the crew as a pet, and the films faithfully maintain the mythology even as they spin their new paradoxes. The conspiracy did not end when Fry destroyed the infosphere. Nibbler is still there. The guardianship is ongoing. Fry saved the universe once, in an episode he does not remember, and then went on living his small life, still watched over, still important, still oblivious, and the films pick that thread up and keep weaving it because the people making this show never really let go of the idea that their idiot delivery boy was, in secret, the one person all of creation could not do without. The last of the 4 films is the one that pays off the whole idea of Fry's special brain one final time, and it does it on a cosmic scale, so it belongs here even though it is not strictly about the freezing. It is called Into the Wild Green Yonder. It came out in early 2009. The story was by Ken Keeler and David X. Cohen. Keeler wrote the screenplay, and Peter Avanzino directed. It took what happened to be the last stretch of the show for a while, serving as the final 4 episodes of a production season, when it was later cut up for broadcast, which is one more example of how tangled the numbering and format history of this show can get. Set that aside, what matters is what it does with Fry's mind. In this film, Fry discovers that his brain has powers beyond simple immunity. Because his mind runs on a different wiring than everyone else's, because he lacks the brainwave that connects all other minds, he turns out to be receptive to things other people cannot perceive. He can, in this story, read minds or something close to it, precisely because his own is unreadable, as though the missing channel in his head leaves him open to a signal no one else can catch. And that ability becomes the key to the film's central threat, which reaches back, once again, to the ancient cosmic war we have been circling all night, because the enemy here belongs to the same lineage of threats Fry was built to fight. The film introduces the idea of the Dark Ones, an ancient species, and a final surviving member of it, a being whose mind cannot be read by any ordinary means, hidden, undetectable, moving through the world unseen because no normal mind can perceive it. And who is the one being in all of existence who can perceive a creature no mind can read? The one man whose own mind sits outside the normal channel. Fry. His unreadable brain is the only instrument sensitive enough to detect the unreadable enemy. It takes a hole to find a hole. It takes the one mind that exists off the shared frequency to sense the one enemy hiding off the shared frequency. So once again, in the last story of this era of the series, Fry's defining anomaly, the thing that started as a joke about him being too dumb to be affected by anything, is revealed to be the exact and only tool the universe needs against an ancient existential threat. The writers never tired of this reversal, and I do not blame them because it is a genuinely beautiful idea that the very thing that makes you an outsider, that keeps you from connecting the way everyone else connects, might be the thing that lets you see what no one else can see. The resolution of the Dark Ones is one of Futurama's stranger and more offhand gestures, and it closes a door forever, which matters, because it is easy to imagine the species surviving somewhere and being wrong about that. Once Fry has sensed the hidden enemy, the last Dark One is dealt with not by Fry at all, but by a creature called the Encyclopod, an enormous living archive born in the middle of the story. A being shaped a little like a manta ray whose whole purpose is to preserve the DNA of endangered and dying species so that nothing living is ever wholly lost. And in the same motion by which it catalogs life, the Encyclopod destroys the final Dark One. The oldest of ancient threats, the last survivor of a lineage, is ended almost in passing, folded into the housekeeping of a giant space creature tidying up the genome of the universe. And there is a lovely small joke buried in it, because the one genome the Encyclopod bothers to save on its way past is not some exotic vanishing wonder, but the DNA of ordinary human beings, which baffles Fry, who expected the rare thing to be worth keeping and never once suspected it might be us. The Dark Ones are gone regardless, permanently, completely, with no possibility of return. There is no reservoir, no backup, no universe where they come back. The last one is killed, and that is the end of them. There is something fitting about that ending sliding into the larger pattern of the conspiracy, because it rhymes with everything else we have talked about. The fate of an ancient cosmic species, a lineage older than almost everything, comes down, in the end, to the least dignified machinery imaginable, a delivery boy too dim to be read pointing at a threat no one else can find, and a passing space animal swallowing it as an afterthought. Fry, the idiot, is the instrument that locates the enemy. The universe does not save itself through heroes rising to greatness. It saves itself again and again through fools and accidents and absurdities, through the exact people and creatures it would never pick doing the exact things it needed done, without any of them fully grasping what they have done. That is Futurama's deepest joke and its deepest belief at the same time, that significance does not land where you would expect it, that the beings who save or end worlds are as likely to be a delivery boy and some strange animal drifting by as they are to be anyone noble. And Into the Wild Green Yonder gives Fry one more thing, something the conspiracy had been withholding from him across the whole run, which is that Leela at the end finally says it. She loves him, after years of nearly, of almost, of Lars, of the flower he did not understand, of the long, slow circling the two of them do around each other. The film lets Leela declare her love for Fry directly, as himself, not as an aged duplicate, not as a wounded better version, but as the actual goofy man he is. And there is something fitting about that arriving in the same story where his strange brain saves everything one last time, because it ties the two threads of Fry together, the cosmic and the human, the mighty one and the lonely guy who just wanted someone to love him. The conspiracy took his old life. It could not, in the end, stop him from building a new one, and the person at the center of that new life was the one the show had been pointing him toward from almost the beginning. Now let me stay with the hardest part of all of this, the part that keeps the Fry conspiracy from being a fun piece of trivia and turns it into something that actually stays with you, which is the ethics of what Nibbler did. Because it would have been so easy for Futurama to give you a villain here, and it refuses, and that refusal is the smartest thing about the whole arc. Think about what Nibbler actually did, laid out plainly. He identified a living person, a young man with a family and a girlfriend and a whole life ahead of him, and he decided that this person's value lay entirely in his future usefulness as a weapon. He then engineered that person's removal from his own time, tricking him into 1,000-year freezing, stealing him from everyone who loved him, and he did it in a way designed to look like an accident so the victim would blame himself. Then he spent the next 1,000 years and the next several years of the man's new life, living in his home as a pet, watching him grieve the life that had been taken and saying nothing. And when the man finally learned the truth and asked, with real pain, why he had not simply been asked, why his consent had not even been sought, the answer he got was that they were afraid he would say no. Put like that, without any softening, it is one of the coldest things ever done to a protagonist by a supposed ally. It is a kidnapping that lasts a lifetime, justified by a calculation the victim was never allowed to make for himself. And yet, And this is where the series earns its complexity. Nibbler is not wrong about the stakes. This is not a case where the ends were dubious and the means were cruel. The end was the survival of literally everything, every star, every planet, every living being, every future that would ever exist, all of it, and Fry really was the only one who could secure it. If Nibbler had asked and Fry had said no and gone home to his family and his ordinary life, then the brain spawn would eventually have completed the infosphere and ended the universe, and there would be no families and no ordinary lives for anyone ever again, Fry's included. Nibbler's calculation, one life weighed against everything, is not the sneering line of a villain. It is a truly agonizing moral question, the oldest one in ethics, the question of whether you are ever permitted to use a person, to treat them as a means rather than an end, if the stakes are high enough. And the show puts its thumb on exactly the point where that question is hardest, because it makes the stakes as high as stakes can possibly go, and makes the person as small and ordinary and undeserving of it as a person can be. What I find remarkable is that Futurama does not let Nibbler off the hook and does not condemn him either. It holds both truths open at the same time and makes you carry them. Nibbler did a terrible thing. Nibbler did the necessary thing. Both. Futurama gives Nibbler real regret, a sense that he understands the weight of what he cost Fry, that he does not treat it as nothing, that the flower and the dream visit to Fry's mother and the small mercies scattered through the story are the gestures of a being who knows he took something he can never give back and is trying inadequately to acknowledge it. Nibbler is not gleeful. He is not a manipulator who enjoys his power. He is an ancient soldier in an endless war who made an impossible choice and lives with it. And that is so much harder to hold than a villain would be, because a villain you can hate and dismiss, and Nibbler you cannot. Because in his position, with the universe in the balance, you are not at all sure you would have done differently. The memory erasure deserves its own hard look in this light, because it is the part I find most troubling, more troubling even than the freezing. The freezing, you can argue, was a one-time necessity, a single terrible act required to get the weapon into position. But the memory erasure is repeated, and it is not strictly necessary in the same way, and it does something the freezing does not. It denies Fry even the dignity of knowing what he did. Twice, Fry learns the full truth of his own importance, learns that he is not a nobody, that his life had cosmic meaning, that the thing everyone mocks him for is the thing that saved existence. And twice that knowledge is taken out of his head, and he is sent back to being the guy nobody takes seriously. You could argue it is a kindness, that he is happier not carrying the weight of it, that a man cannot live a normal life knowing he is the mighty one with an ancient war resting on him. But you could just as easily argue it is the final indignity that having taken his past, his family, and his time, they also take from him the one thing that might have made it all bearable, the knowledge that it meant something. Fry does not even get to keep his own heroism. He saves everything and is returned to his life as a fool on purpose by the people he saved it for. And Futurama, characteristically, does not resolve this for you. It does not have Fry deliver a speech forgiving Nibbler, and it does not have him renounce him either. Life at Planet Express simply goes on. Nibbler goes back to the lap, the crew goes back to their deliveries, and the enormity of what was done sits underneath the comedy, unspoken, the way real griefs and real forgivenesses often sit underneath ordinary life. Never quite articulated, never quite finished. I think that is the truest possible way to handle it. Because most people carrying a wound that large do not get a scene where it resolves. They get a life that continues to be funny and sad and small and ordinary, with the enormous thing sitting silently under all of it, occasionally surfacing, never going away. There is a reading of the whole conspiracy, and it is the one I keep coming back to, that the Fry arc is Futurama's meditation on consent and on being used, dressed up as science fiction. Every one of us, in some sense, was placed in our lives without being asked. None of us consented to be born here, now, into this body and this family and this century, to be shaped by forces we did not choose and could not have understood if we had been consulted. Fry's situation is just that ordinary human fact turned up to a cosmic volume and given a specific author. He was placed where he is by a power that decided it knew better than he did what his life was for. And the question the show leaves you with, the question it refuses to answer, is whether that is an outrage or simply the condition of being alive. Whether Nibbler is a kidnapper or just a name we can put on the thing that puts all of us where we are without asking. That is a lot of weight for a cartoon about a delivery boy and a robot to carry. And the astonishing thing is that it carries it without ever once breaking the comedy, without ever announcing that it is being profound. It just leaves the question sitting there, under the jokes, for anyone who wants to pick it up. I want to step back from Fry himself for a while and talk about the people who built this, because the Fry conspiracy is not the accident of a show that got lucky with its continuity. It is the natural product of a writer's room unlike almost any other in television history. And once you understand who was in that room, the whole everything means something quality of the series stops being surprising and starts feeling inevitable. Futurama was written, to an unusual degree, by scientists. Not by people who liked science or read popular science, but by people with advanced degrees in it, mathematicians and physicists and computer scientists who had done real research before they decided to write jokes for a cartoon. David X. Cohen, who ran the series with Matt Groening and carried the Fry mystery in his head from the beginning, has a background in physics and computer science. Ken Keeler, who wrote several of the films and many of the show's most intricate episodes, holds a doctorate in applied mathematics. And they were not alone. The room was stacked with this kind of mind, people for whom a puzzle was a pleasure and a hidden structure was a thing worth building, even if almost no one would ever notice it. When you have a room full of people like that, you do not get a show that plants a clue by accident. You get a show that plants clues the way those people were trained to think, rigorously, patiently, with the payoff worked out in advance and hidden inside the premises. The clearest proof of what that room was willing to do for its own amusement is the language Futurama has, hidden in its backgrounds, on signs and labels and graffiti and product packaging and alien writing system. And it is not decorative gibberish. It is a real cipher, a code that can be read. The first version of it is a straightforward substitution, one alien symbol standing for one letter, the kind of thing a dedicated fan could crack in an afternoon. And once fans cracked it, they started reading the background of every episode and finding jokes, comments, extra gags written in plain sight for anyone willing to decode them. And then, because the writers are who they are, when fans had solved the first alphabet, Futurama introduced a second one, and the second one is harder, built on a more complicated mathematical rule, rather than a simple letter-for-letter swap, a code designed specifically to resist the casual code breaking that had beaten the first one. Think about the mentality of that. They built a secret language, watched their audience solve it, and responded not by giving up the game, but by making a harder one. That is not how normal television treats its background art. That is how mathematicians treat a challenge, and it goes further than hidden language, into the actual mathematics of the plots. There is an episode built around a machine that swaps two people's minds into each other's bodies, with a catch, that the same two bodies can never swap back with each other directly, so that once several people have been swapping minds around, getting everyone back into their correct body becomes a genuine mathematical problem, a puzzle in the theory of permutations. And rather than hand-wave a solution, Ken Keeler with his doctorate sat down and proved an actual theorem, a real, valid piece of mathematics demonstrating that no matter how tangled the mind swaps have become, everyone can always be returned to their own body with the addition of at most 2 extra people. That proof appears on a chalkboard in the episode. It is a real theorem written for a cartoon, and people in mathematics genuinely refer to it now, sometimes calling it the Futurama theorem. A television comedy generated a new, legitimate piece of publishable mathematics because the plot needed one, and there happened to be someone in the room who could just make it. Once you know this is the kind of room that made the show, the Fry conspiracy reads completely differently. Of course, they planted a shadow in the first episode and paid it off 4 years later. Of course, they built a chosen one mythology where the mechanism, the missing brainwave, is rigorously consistent and traces back through a stable, closed time loop to a specific cause. Of course, the immunity was introduced before its cause and the cause before its explanation, in a deliberately scrambled order that only resolves when you assemble the whole thing yourself. This is a room that built a second cipher to defeat the fans who beat the first one. Constructing a multi-year mystery with every piece locking precisely into place is exactly the kind of thing these people did for fun. The Fry conspiracy is not Futurama straining beyond its nature. It is the series being completely characteristically itself, applying the same rigor to its emotional architecture that it applied to its background jokes and its chalkboards. And that is the thing I find most moving about the whole enterprise, honestly, because it would have been so easy for a room full of clever people to be clever and cold. Rooms of very smart people often produce work that is intricate and hollow, puzzles with nothing inside them, showing off. Futurama did the opposite. It took all that rigor, all that mathematical patience, all that willingness to build structures almost no one would fully see, and it pointed it at feeling. The single most carefully engineered thing in the entire show is not a joke and not a cipher. It is the slow, precise, devastating revelation that a lonely man was robbed of his life for a reason he would never be allowed to remember. They used the tools of mathematicians to build a machine whose only purpose was to break your heart on a schedule, years in advance, with the timing worked out like a proof. That is a very strange and very beautiful thing for a group of scientists to have spent their talent on. It also explains why the show rewards the kind of attention we are giving it tonight. A lot of television does not survive this sort of scrutiny. You look closely at the continuity and it falls apart. The clues turn out to be coincidences, the mythology turns out to have been made up as it went along and patched over later. Futurama mostly holds. The pieces mostly fit. When you trace the Fry conspiracy back through the episodes, you do not find a mess that fans have generously reinterpreted into a plan. You find a plan laid down by people who thought in plans, dressed up as a comedy so thoroughly that most of the audience experienced it as nothing more than a funny show about the future. The everything means something feeling you get watching Futurama closely is not a fan projection. It is a real property of the thing, put there on purpose by people who could not help themselves. Here's something the conspiracy does that I do not think gets said enough. For all the cosmic machinery, all the brain spawn and infospheres and ancient wars, the thing the Fry conspiracy is really building toward, the thing it keeps handing him at the end of every reveal, is not a victory over an enemy. It is Leela, the flower after the infosphere, the love confessed at the end of the last film. Over and over, when Futurama finishes putting Fry through the cosmic ringer, what it gives him is not glory, which he never remembers anyway, but a step closer to the woman he loves. And I have come to think that is deliberate, that the love story is not a subplot running alongside the conspiracy, but the actual point of it, the human meaning, the cosmic scaffolding exists to hold up. Consider the shape of Fry's whole situation through the lens of the romance. The conspiracy took everything from him, his family, his century, his old girlfriend, his entire first life, and dropped him alone into a world 1,000 years from anyone who ever knew him. A person that thoroughly severed from his past has, in a sense, nothing to build a future on except what he can make new. And the first thing Fry does in the future, the very first person he meets after thawing, is Leela, the woman who processes him, who is supposed to assign him his career chip and send him off to a life he does not want. The conspiracy that ruined him and the love that redeems him enter his story in the same breath. The thing that took his old life and the person who becomes his new one are structurally the same event. He would never have met her if he had not been frozen, and he would never have been frozen if a small alien had not decided he mattered. The clearest expression of how much that love means to him comes in the episode that was, for a while, Futurama's ending, the last one Fox aired before the first cancellation. It is called The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings, and it aired in the summer of 2003. In it, Fry tries to do the one thing he has never been able to do, to express what he feels for Leela, and he decides to do it through music, through a fragile, difficult instrument called the holophoner that projects images as you play. The problem is that Fry has no talent, no skill, nothing but the feeling, and so he makes a deal with the robot devil to trade for a pair of skilled robot hands, and the deal spirals, as deals with devils do, into an opera and a disaster. And at the very end, the deal undone, Fry sits down to play for Leela with his own clumsy hands, badly, haltingly, the images flickering and imperfect. And he tells her, in effect, that this is the best he can do, that he wrote it for her, that he cannot play it well, but he means every note of it. And Leela, who has spent the whole series holding him at arm's length, tells him to keep playing and stays to listen to the rest. That was almost the last image Futurama ever gave us, a man with no talent playing a broken song for a woman who has finally decided to stay and hear it out. If the network had never brought the show back, that would have been the ending, and it would have been a good one because it says the truest thing the series believes about Fry. He is not good at anything, he means everything, and to the one person who matters, meaning it turns out to be enough. That is the answer Futurama keeps offering to the cruelty of the conspiracy. And it is not a cheap answer, it is not the show waving away the theft of a man's life with a love story. It is subtler than that. What Futurama seems to argue across all these years is that Fry's significance to the universe, the mighty one, the missing brainwave, the weapon against the brain spawn, all of that cosmic importance is real but empty to him, because he cannot even remember it. It happens and is erased and happens again and is erased again. And none of it touches his actual lived life. But his significance to Leela, one ordinary woman on one ordinary crew, is the thing he gets to keep. That, he remembers, that no one wipes. The universe uses him and discards the memory of it, but Leela loves him and lets him keep that. And Futurama, given the choice of which kind of importance to end on, chooses the small one every single time. Save the universe, forget it, come home, love someone, remember that. The cosmic scale is the setting, the love is the story. There is a real ache underneath this though, and I do not want to make it sound tidier than it is. Because even the love is shadowed by the conspiracy, by the loops, by the sense that Fry never quite gets to choose freely. Leela first falls fully for a version of him that had to age and suffer and die to become lovable. The stranded duplicate we talked about earlier. The flower she receives is one he does not understand. The love confessed at the end of the last film comes wrapped up with a cosmic mission he was, again, chosen for. Even Fry's romance keeps getting routed through the machinery of destiny and paradox, as though the series cannot quite let him have one clean, uncomplicated, self-authored thing. And maybe that is the point too. Maybe the show is saying this is simply what love is for a person whose life was arranged by forces outside him, which is to say, for all of us. You do not get to love in a vacuum, free of everything that shaped you. You love out of the exact circumstances that were handed to you without your permission. And the wonder is that it works at all, that something real and chosen can grow up out of a life you did not choose. Fry did not choose to be frozen, did not choose the future, did not choose to meet Leela on the day he was processed like cargo. And he chose to love her anyway, with everything he had and none of the skill. And she chose him back. In a story this full of things done to people without their consent, that mutual choosing is the one act that is fully, freely theirs. When Futurama was canceled a second time, this time by Comedy Central, it got to write itself another ending, and the ending it chose is not part of the Fry conspiracy in the strict sense. No Nibbler, no brain spawn, no missing brainwave, and yet it is the perfect capstone to everything the conspiracy was about. Because it takes the two ideas that ran under the whole Fry story, the time loop and the erased memory, and it turns them at last into a choice made freely, together, by two people instead of one. The episode is called Meanwhile, and it aired in 2013 as the series finale. The device this time is one of the professor's inventions, a small button that lets you jump 10 seconds back in time, undoing whatever just happened and giving you those 10 seconds to live over again. Fry gets hold of it, and his plan, sweetly and typically, is to use it to arrange the perfect marriage proposal to Leela, to ask her to meet him at the top of a tall building, and if anything goes wrong, to rewind and try again until it is perfect. And of course, this being Fry, it goes wrong in a way the button cannot fix. Through a misunderstanding about the time, Fry believes Leela has not come, believes she has rejected him, and in his despair, he jumps off the building, meaning to use the button to rewind before he hits the ground. But the timing fails, and he is falling, and to save himself, he presses the button over and over, and something breaks. The mechanism, pushed too hard, freezes time for the entire universe. Everything stops. Every person, every process, the whole of existence caught mid-motion, motionless, forever. Everything except Fry and Leela, who can still move, still walk, still speak, alone in a world frozen in place around them. And here is what they do with it, and it is the gentlest, most grown-up thing Futurama ever did. They do not panic. They do not spend the rest of the episode frantically trying to fix it. They live. Fry and Leela, alone together in a universe that has stopped, simply go and have a life. They get married in the frozen world, with a stranger caught mid-step as their unmoving witness. They travel. They grow old together, the two of them, over what the episode implies is a full lifetime, wandering a beautiful, still, silent world that belongs entirely to them. Two people who spent the whole series not quite managing to be together, finally having all the time there is, more time than anyone has ever had, all of it just for each other. After everything the conspiracy took from Fry, after a life stolen and a family lost and a heroism he could never remember, the show gives him this, not the universe's gratitude, not even his memories of saving it, just Leela and time and quiet and a whole life lived slowly with the person he loves. And then, when they are old, the professor appears. He has been frozen too, all this time, but he arrives, having found a way, and he tells them he can fix it. He can use the button to reset time, to send everything back to the instant before it all froze, to unstick the universe and let it run again. But there is a cost, the cost that has haunted the entire Fry story from the beginning. If he resets it, Fry and Leela will go back to that moment on the building, before any of this, and they will not remember. The entire lifetime they just spent together, the marriage, the traveling, the growing old, all of it will be erased, undone, gone, as though it never happened, because in the reset timeline, it never will have. The series, at the very end, hands Fry the exact devil's bargain the Nibblonians kept forcing on him, a memory of the best thing in his life, about to be wiped clean. Only this time it is not done to him in secret. This time he is asked. This time he gets to choose. The professor asks if they want to do it, knowing they will forget everything, and Leela asks Fry what he thinks. And Fry says, in effect, that if she is asking whether he wants to go around again, then yes, he does. Let us go around again. And they press the button, and time resets, and the two of them are returned to the moment before, remembering nothing of the lifetime they shared. And Futurama ends there, on the two of them together at the start of a story they have already lived and lost and are about to live again without knowing it. And I find that almost unbearably lovely as a place to leave Fry, because it takes the cruelest mechanic in his whole story, the erased memory, and it redeems it completely. Every other time Fry's memory was taken, it was taken from him, without asking, as a thing done to him. This time, he gives it up himself, willingly, with open eyes, and he gives it up not to save the universe, but simply to keep loving Leela, to go around again, to have it all one more time, even at the price of not knowing he ever had it before. That is the series' final word on everything the conspiracy raised. It spent years asking whether it is bearable to have your life arranged by forces you did not choose, whether it means anything to be significant if you cannot remember your significance, whether a person can be whole after everything has been taken and taken and taken from his memory. And at the end it answers, not with a speech, but with a man choosing freely for the first time to lose his memory of a perfect life for the chance to live it again. Fry finally gets to be the author of his own forgetting, and what he chooses to build his forgotten life around, given all of time and the whole frozen universe to do it in, is not a mission, not a destiny, not the war he was bred to fight. It is a person. It was always going to be a person. There is a question underneath the whole Fry conspiracy that the show never states out loud but keeps circling, and it is the oldest question there is about a life, which is whether Fry was chosen or whether he was simply ordinary and had a role dropped on him. And the strange, characteristic answer Futurama gives, when you trace it all the way through, is both at once, in a way that gently dismantles the entire idea of a chosen one, even while it plays the chosen one story completely straight. On one hand, Fry is as chosen as a character can possibly be. He is the mighty one. He was selected by the oldest race in existence, out of all the beings who have ever lived, as the single indispensable weapon against the end of everything. His whole life was arranged around this purpose before he was even aware there was a purpose. That is destiny in its purest form, the sense that you were made for something, that your life has a shape someone drew in advance, that you matter cosmically and always did. Most chosen one stories stop there and let the hero grow into his greatness. And on the other hand, and at the very same time, Fry is the least special person imaginable. He is a dropout delivery boy who is bad at his job, dim, aimless, mocked, the guy no one would ever pick for anything. The series never lets him become worthy of his destiny in the ordinary sense. He does not train, does not grow wise, does not earn his role. He remains to the end exactly the nobody he always was. His chosenness and his ordinariness never resolve into each other. They just coexist, rubbing against each other, refusing to be reconciled. And here's what I think the show is doing with that, and it is subtle enough that it is easy to miss under the jokes. By making its chosen one the least deserving, least remarkable person available, and by refusing to ever upgrade him into someone who fits the prophecy, Futurama is carefully arguing that the whole idea of being chosen is a kind of accident dressed up as meaning. Fry is not special because of anything about who he is. He is special because of a genetic quirk he caused by mistake, a missing brainwave he gave himself by blundering into his own past. His cosmic importance has nothing to do with his character, his virtue, his effort, his worth as a person. It is a fluke of wiring. The universe did not choose Fry because Fry was the best. It chose him because he happened to have a hole in his head that nothing else in existence had. That is chosenness stripped of all its flattery. You can be the single, indispensable being alive, and it can mean nothing about you at all. I find that a strangely comforting idea, honestly, and I think Futurama intends it to be, underneath the comedy of it, because most of us are not the mighty one. Most of us are much closer to Fry as everyone treats him, ordinary, unremarkable, not obviously chosen for anything, getting through our small lives without a cosmic purpose announcing itself. And Futurama, by making its hero someone exactly like that, someone whose significance is real, but arbitrary and unearned and unrememberable, is saying something gentle about the relationship between mattering and deserving. Fry does not deserve to matter more than anyone else. He just does, by accident, and it does not make him better than the people around him, and it does not make his life easier, and he cannot even hold on to it. If cosmic significance can land on a person as undeserving and unchanged as Fry, then significance is not a reward for being special. It is just something that happens or does not for reasons that have nothing to do with your worth, which means the absence of it in your own life is not a verdict on you either. The time loops push this even further into something close to a statement about fate itself. Remember that Fry being his own grandfather is a stable, closed loop, a thing that always happened, that could not happen, that was written into the structure of time from before he was born. The same is true of the tattoo, put on him in his sleep by a friend who was always going to travel back and put it there. In these loops, there is no freedom. Fry was bound to go back to that desert. He was bound to be frozen. He was bound to become the weapon. From the perspective of the whole timeline, nothing Fry does is chosen because it has all already happened, sealed, fixed, unchangeable. The loops are a picture of a completely determined life, a life with no room in it for a different outcome, a man walking a path that was drawn before he took his first step. And yet the show does not leave you feeling that Fry is a puppet, and that is the trick I keep admiring. Because inside the fixed loops, in the moments that matter most, Fry chooses the thing he was always going to do anyway, and the choosing is real even though the outcome was fixed. When he learns the truth in the infosphere and decides to ensure his own freezing, the timeline required him to do it, but he does it knowingly, willingly, as an act of his own. When he presses the button at the very end to go around again, the loop of his life with Leela closes exactly as it must, but he closes it himself, on purpose because he wants to. The series seems to land on the idea that freedom is not about escaping the shape of your life. The shape is fixed, the way it is fixed for all of us. None of us chose to be born. None of us can rewrite the past that made us. Freedom is about how you meet the shape, whether you go around again, resentful that you were placed on the wheel, or whether you look at the person beside you and say, yes, this, again, gladly. Fry does not get to choose his destiny, he gets to choose how he holds it. And Futurama suggests in the end that this smaller freedom, the freedom of consent to a life you did not design, might be the only kind any of us ever actually has, and might be enough. There is a rhyme between what happens to Fry and what happened to the show itself that I do not think is a coincidence, or if it is a coincidence, it is the kind that becomes true by being noticed. Because Futurama, like its hero, has died and been thawed more times than almost anything should survive, and the story of its own cancellations and returns reads like the Fry conspiracy told from the outside, a thing repeatedly frozen and repeatedly brought back, outliving its own endings again and again. Start with the beginning. Futurama premiered on Fox in the spring of 1999, and Fox, to put it plainly, never knew what to do with it. The network moved it around the schedule, preempted it constantly for sports, aired episodes out of order, and generally treated a carefully constructed serialized comedy as though it were disposable filler. A show planting a 4-year mystery in its first episode was being scheduled by people who could not guarantee it would be on at the same time 2 weeks running. And so after 4 production seasons, Fox let it go. The last episode of that original run was the one we talked about, the man playing a broken song on the holophoner for the woman who finally stayed to listen, and for a while that was the end. Futurama was frozen. It went into the ice not knowing if it would ever thaw, and then it thawed the way Fry thawed, unexpectedly and a metaphorical 1,000 years later. Reruns on other channels found the audience Fox's scheduling had scattered. The series sold on DVD in numbers that made everyone reconsider. And out of that afterlife came the first revival, the 4 films, released between 2007 and 2009, the ones that gave us Lars and the closed-loop tattoo and the last of the Dark Ones, and Leela finally saying she loved him. That was the first resurrection. A show Fox had put in the ground came back from its own cancellation because the people who loved it would not let it stay dead, and the creators picked up the Fry conspiracy exactly where they had left it, as though no time had passed, as though the freeze had changed nothing. The films did well enough that the show came back properly on Comedy Central, returning to regular episodes in 2010, and it ran for several more years, giving us the mother in the dream, the parking tone from Nibbler's ship, and eventually the frozen world and the button and go around again. That was the second life, or the third, depending on how you count the films, and it too came to an end, canceled again in 2013, with meanwhile an ending so complete and so beautiful it truly felt, this time like Futurama had finally been allowed to finish on its own terms. 2 people, old and happy, choosing to go around again. If you were going to be frozen forever, that was the note to be frozen on. Most fans made their peace with it. Futurama had died twice and come back once, and now it had died a 3rd time, having said everything it needed to say. That seemed reasonably to be that, except it thawed again. In 2023, Futurama returned once more, this time on Hulu, brought back a 3rd time, a show now outliving not just its own cancellations, but the very networks and eras that had canceled it. A cartoon declared finished by Fox, by direct-to-DVD closure, and by Comedy Central, and simply refusing each time to stay finished. It went into the ice on Fox in 2003, and it is, as of the time we are talking, still coming back. And I cannot help seeing Fry in that. A thing supposedly ordinary, supposedly not worth keeping, canceled and dismissed and left for gone, that turns out to be far more durable than anyone who dismissed it ever guessed. That keeps getting thawed out of the ice 1,000 years later because it turns out to matter more than its own network ever understood. The parallel goes deeper than just survival, though. Think about what the freezing means in Fry's story and what the cancellations mean in the shows. Both are involuntary. Fry did not choose to be frozen, and Futurama did not choose to be canceled. Both are ruptures, sudden endings imposed from outside by powers that did not value the thing they were ending. And in both cases, the rupture turns out not to be final because the thing that was frozen had a value its captors could not see. Fox looked at Futurama and saw a show that was not pulling the numbers, the way everyone looked at Fry and saw a delivery boy who was not worth much. And in both cases, they were wrong in the same way. Wrong about worth, wrong about durability, wrong about what happens when you put something in the ice and assume it will not come back. The Fry conspiracy is a story about a thing being undervalued and frozen and then turning out to matter more than anything else there was. The show is that story lived out in the real world over decades in the medium of television scheduling and DVD sales and streaming deals. Futurama is a show about surviving your own cancellation that has itself survived its own cancellation 3 separate times. And there is a lovely, slightly eerie symmetry in the fact that the conspiracy inside the series is fundamentally about patience, about a payoff planted years in advance and trusted to land eventually, and Futurama outside itself required exactly that same patience from its audience to exist at all. The people who kept Futurama alive across all those freezes were doing, in the real world, what Nibbler did in the fiction. They were guarding something valuable through a long, cold sleep, refusing to let it be forgotten, waiting for the moment it could come back and matter again. The audience became the Nibblonians, and the show, frozen and thawed, became Fry, carried through the years by people who saw a worth in it the world had written off, waiting in the ice for its next thaw. If you step back from all the individual episodes and look at the Fry conspiracy as a single piece of storytelling, one feature stands out above everything else, and it is the thing that gives the whole arc its particular flavor of sadness. From very early on, you, the viewer, know more about Fry's life than Fry does. You know he was pushed before he knows it. You know Nibbler is not a pet, while Fry is still scratching him behind the ears. You know the shadow, you know the reason, you know the destiny, all of it, while the man it all belongs to wanders through his days believing he is a nobody who got unlucky. The entire conspiracy runs on this gap, and the gap never really closes, because every time Fry starts to catch up to what you know, his memory is wiped and he falls behind again. That is dramatic irony, the oldest tool in storytelling, but Futurama uses it in an unusually tender and unusually cruel way. Usually dramatic irony is about tension, about the audience wanting to shout a warning at a character walking into danger they cannot see. Here it is about loneliness. Fry is the only person in his own story who does not know his own story. Everyone else, eventually, the Nibblonians, the brain spawn, the audience, even his own friends in certain moments before the wipes, holds pieces of the truth about who Fry is that Fry himself is not allowed to keep. There is something profoundly isolating in that, in being the protagonist of a cosmic epic and experiencing it from the inside, as an ordinary, disappointing life. Fry saved the universe and remembers going to get pizza. Fry is his own grandfather and does not think about it. Fry matters more than anyone alive and spends his days being condescended to by everyone around him. The distance between what his life means and what his life feels like, to him, is the whole ache of the character. And I think that is a truer picture of how significance actually works than most stories are willing to give. Because in real life, none of us gets to stand outside our own existence and see its shape. We do not get the footage the brainspawn showed Fry, the replay that reveals the hidden cause of everything. We live our lives from the inside, in the ordinary texture of days that mostly feel small, and whatever meaning they have, whatever pattern they are part of, whatever we turn out to have mattered to, we largely do not get to see. Fry is an exaggerated version of the ordinary human condition, a man whose life has enormous meaning that he personally cannot perceive. The conspiracy, read this way, is not really about aliens at all. It is about the strange fact that a life can matter enormously and feel to the person living it like nothing much. Most of us will never know the full weight of what we were part of. Fry just has the cosmic cartoon version of the same not knowing. There are things the conspiracy leaves truly open to, threads Futurama never fully tied off. And I think it is worth being honest that not every question has an answer, because a lot of explainer accounts pretend the whole thing is a sealed box when it is not. The business of the shadow in the pilot, whether it was truly there in the first broadcast or refined later, we have already talked about, and it remains unsettled, a small permanent argument that will probably outlive everyone having it. There is the question of exactly who remembers what and when, given how many times memories are wiped, which produces little inconsistencies if you press too hard on which characters ought to know about Nibbler at which points in the timeline. There is the deeper question the series deliberately refuses to answer, whether Nibbler's cruelty was actually necessary in the specific form it took. whether there was some gentler way to get Fry to the future that the Nibblonians simply did not bother to find because the brutal way was easier. The show never claims its own answer to that is the only possible one. It leaves room for you to think Nibbler could have done better, and it leaves room for you to think he could not have, and it does not tell you which is right. What I appreciate is that Futurama is comfortable with these open edges because a story that explained absolutely everything, that sealed every seam, would not feel like a life, and the Fry conspiracy, whatever else it is trying to feel like a life. Real lives have loose threads. Real pasts have events we can never fully verify, moments where we are not sure what really happened or why, questions about the people who shaped us that we will never get to ask. Fry's story has all of that. It has a founding moment, the freezing, that is both perfectly explained and permanently a little mysterious, because even after you know Nibbler pushed him, there is a residue of the unknowable in it, the sense that you can trace a life all the way back to its cause and still not quite hold the whole of why it went the way it did. The conspiracy gives you an enormous amount of answer and then, wisely, stops just short of giving you all of it and leaves the last bit of mystery intact, the way your own origins are, no matter how much of the story you manage to reconstruct. And that connects back to the thing I keep circling tonight, which is the flower. Because when Fry comes back from the infosphere with his memory wiped, holding a flower he does not understand, he is in exactly the position Futurama puts you in about a life. He is holding the residue of an enormous, meaningful event, the evidence that something huge happened to him without access to what it was. He knows the flower matters. He does not know why. And he gives it to Leela anyway, acting on a meaning he cannot see, trusting the gesture even though the reason has been taken from him. That is the most human thing in the whole cosmic story, and it is the thing the conspiracy, for all its brains and loops and ancient wars, finally comes down to. We are all walking around holding flowers we do not fully understand, carrying forward the meaning of things we cannot remember the cause of, and doing the kind gesture anyway. Fry does not need to know he is the mighty one to give Leela a flower. He just needs to want to. And that, the show seems to say, is enough. It was always going to be enough. There is one more consequence of the conspiracy that the series almost never states directly, and it might be the biggest one, because it is the thing that makes the whole tragedy bearable. The freezing took Fry's old family from him, but the future it dropped him into gave him a new one, and that new family is, in a strange and literal way, partly descended from him. The conspiracy did not just cost Fry a life, it handed him another one, populated by people he would come to love as much as anyone he lost, and Futurama, without ever making a speech about it, keeps gently showing you that the accidental gift and the deliberate theft are the same event. Think about who Fry finds when he thaws. He finds Leela, who becomes the love of his life. He finds Bender, a foul-mouthed, larcenous, self-obsessed robot who becomes, against every expectation, his closest friend, the person he lives with, drinks with, gets into trouble with, the brother he lost replaced by a machine who would never admit to caring about him and clearly does. He finds Amy and Hermes and Zoidberg, a whole workplace that slowly becomes a family, the way workplaces sometimes do, a group of people thrown together by employment who end up being the ones who show up for each other. Fry arrives in the future with nothing, no family, no friends, no history, a man erased from his own time, and he builds, from scratch, out of the strangers at a delivery company, a life full of people. The conspiracy emptied him out completely, and in doing so, made room for all of that. And then there is the professor, and this is where the show does something rather astonishing that is easy to walk right past. Professor Farnsworth, the ancient, senile genius who runs Planet Express and gives Fry his job and becomes a kind of grandfather figure to him, is Fry's descendant. He is Fry's great-great and so on nephew, a member of the very family line Fry, by becoming his own grandfather, founded. Which means the job Fry gets in the future, the company he works for, the crew he joins, the found family that redeems his lost life, all of it comes to him through a man who exists because of Fry, through the bloodline Fry created back in that desert. The future did not give Fry a random new home. It gave him a home run by his own descendant, a family that is, by a wildly tangled route, still his family. He lost his brother and his mother and his father 1,000 years in the past, and he woke up into the care of his own, however many times great nephew. The conspiracy took his family and then returned him to it by the longest route imaginable. That is such a beautiful and such a sad idea when you hold the whole of it at once. Fry cannot go home. His mother, his father, his brother Yancey, they are gone, 1,000 years gone, and nothing in Futurama ever pretends otherwise. The dream visit to his mother is a gift precisely because it is the exception, because he cannot actually have her back. And yet he is not, in the end, without family, because the family he lost eventually produced the family he found. The line continued. Yancey named a son after him, and that name, that continuation, that refusal of the family to let Fry be erased, ran down through 1,000 years and arrived in the fullness of time, as the Professor, as Planet Express, as the place Fry belongs. The love that Fry's family had for him in the 20th century did not die when he vanished. It propagated. It became the future that would eventually take him in. I think this is Futurama's deepest answer to the cruelty at the center of the conspiracy, deeper even than the love story, and it is an answer about how loss and belonging are braided together in a way you cannot pull apart. The Nibblonians took everything from Fry, and they were not gentle about it, and the series never lets them off the hook for it. But the very completeness of the loss is what made the new belonging possible. A man who had not lost everything would not have arrived in the future, open and empty and available to be adopted by a robot and a one-eyed captain and a crab doctor and his own distant nephew. Fry's capacity to build the family he builds is a direct product of the family he lost. The hole the conspiracy tore in him is the exact shape of the life that grew back to fill it. And that is not a tidy consolation. It does not make the theft okay, but it is true, and the show knows it is true. And it lets both things stand, the way it lets everything difficult stand, without resolving them into a lesson. You can lose your whole world and build another. The second world does not replace the first, does not undo it, does not make the loss stop mattering. It just grows, real and warm and yours, in the space the loss cleared. Fry is the proof. He is a man who lost a family to a conspiracy and found a family because of it, and both families are his, and he grieves the one and loves the other, and there is no contradiction in that. Only a life. I have saved the hardest piece of the cost for near the end because it is the one with nothing cosmic about it at all. No brains, no aliens, no destiny, just a dog. There is an episode from the same great run as the ones we have been talking about, aired in 2002, called Jurassic Bark, and it is, by a wide agreement among people who love this show, the single most devastating thing Futurama ever made. It is about the dog Fry left behind, and it is where the human cost of the freezing stops being an idea and becomes something you feel in your chest for the rest of your life. Back in the 20th century, before the freezing, Fry had a dog, a scruffy little dog named Seymour, who loved him the way dogs love, completely and without reservation. And in the future, 1,000 years later, Fry discovers that Seymour has been preserved, fossilized, turned to stone, and that the professor has the technology to bring him back, to clone the dog from the fossil, to give Fry back the one piece of his old life he might actually be able to hold again. Fry is overjoyed. He is going to get his dog back. And then he learns something that changes his mind. He learns that Seymour did not die young, did not die soon after Fry vanished. Seymour lived on for many years, growing old, reaching the age of about 15, which meant a dozen more years of life after the night Fry disappeared. And Fry, in a gesture he believes is loving and generous, decides not to clone him. He reasons that Seymour must have lived a good, full life without him, must have found a new owner, new walks, new years of happiness, and that it would be selfish to drag a copy of him into the future. He lets the fossil be. He gives up his dog a second time out of love, believing the dog moved on and was happy. And then Futurama shows you what actually happened in the last minute, in a flashback Fry never sees, and it breaks you. Because Seymour did not move on. Seymour did not find a new owner or a new life. After Fry vanished into the ice, Seymour went back to the place he had last seen him, the front of Panucci's Pizza, and he waited. And he kept waiting. The flashback shows the years passing, seasons turning, the dog getting older and grayer and thinner, lying in the same spot outside the pizzeria, watching the door, waiting for a master who was frozen in a tube across the city and was never, ever going to walk back out to him. Seymour waited there for 12 years, the whole rest of his life, faithful past all reason, until he was old and could not wait any longer, and he died there, still waiting, still watching the door, never knowing what happened, never understanding why Fry did not come back. And the horror of it, the thing that lands like a blow, is that Fry gives up on cloning him, believing the exact opposite of the truth, believing the dog was happy and moved on, when in fact the dog spent its entire remaining life in an agony of loyalty Fry will now never even know about. I have to be honest that this episode is almost too much, and I think it is meant to be, because it takes everything the conspiracy did to Fry and shows it to you from the other side, from the side of the ones left behind. All along, we have been feeling the freezing as Fry's loss, the man torn from his time, and that is real. But Jurassic Bark turns it around and shows you the loss from the perspective of the people and the animals who lost him, who did not get a new future full of robots and love and adventure, who just got an absence, a person who left and never came back and never explained. Fry got a whole new life out of the freezing. Seymour got a doorway to watch until he died. That asymmetry is the cruelest thing in the entire Fry story, crueler than anything the brain spawn ever threatened because it is so small and so real. One of them got to move on, the other one just waited, and it connects to the conspiracy in a way that makes Nibbler's calculation land even harder. Remember, he set one life against the whole universe, and he was talking about Fry's life, the one life he judged an acceptable price. But Fry's life was not the only thing on that scale. On that scale was also a mother who would spend her days not knowing what happened to her son, a brother who would name his child after a ghost, and a dog who would wait outside a pizzeria for 12 years for a man who could not come. When Nibbler decided to freeze Fry, he was not spending one life. He was spending every attachment that reached out from that life, every person and creature who loved Fry and would now love an absence instead. Futurama, by giving you Seymour, makes sure you understand the cost of the conspiracy was never really paid by Fry alone. It was paid by everyone who was left standing on a curb, watching a door, waiting for someone the Nibblonians had carried 1,000 years away. And not one of them ever got to know why. That is the weight the comedy is carrying underneath, all the time, in every episode, whether it is showing it to you or not. Somewhere in the past, a dog is still waiting. The show does not always make you look at it, but it is always true. And once you have seen it, you cannot watch Fry's happy new life in the future, his friends and his love and his adventures, without also holding the knowledge of what that life cost and who paid for it and how little any of them ever understood about the reason. Fry gets his flower, Seymour gets the door. The conspiracy gave one of them everything and took everything from the other, and the difference between them is nothing more than which side of the ice you happen to be on. I want to give some time to Bender before we close, because in all the talk of Nibbler and Leela and lost families, it is easy to leave out the person who is arguably Fry's most important relationship in the future, and who turns out, when you look closely, to be tangled into the machinery of the conspiracy in his own strange way. Bender is the second person Fry really meets in the future, right after Leela, and the friendship between the human idiot and the criminal robot becomes the spine of the whole series. The relationship given the widest stretch of screen time, the funniest material, and underneath, a surprising amount of Futurama's heart. On the surface, Bender is the opposite of everything sincere. He is greedy, vain, dishonest, lazy, addicted to everything, loudly convinced that he does not care about anyone but himself, forever announcing that he is going to build his own version of whatever he has been excluded from. He is a machine designed, literally, for the mundane job of bending metal, who dreams of being a folk singer and a killer and a king and anything other than what he is. And the joke the series plays over and over is that this cynical, self-obsessed robot who insists he has no feelings is, in practice, as loyal a friend as Fry could possibly have. Bender lives with Fry. When Fry has nowhere to go, Bender takes him into an apartment that is really just a closet and never quite admits that he wants him there. The robot who claims to love nothing has organized his whole life around a friendship he will not confess to. That gap between what Bender says about himself and what Bender does is reliably one of the touching things in Futurama, because it is so recognizable, the tough exterior wrapped around a loyalty the person cannot bring themselves to name. And this is where Bender folds into the conspiracy, into the loops we have been tracing, because it is Bender, more than anyone except Nibbler, who keeps turning up at the fixed points of Fry's tangled timeline. It is Bender who travels back through time in the first film and finds Fry frozen in the tube and marks his sleeping body with the code that makes the whole plot possible. It is Bender whose parts are scattered across the desert in 1947 and whose head is left buried for 1,000 years, waiting in the sand through the same long stretch Fry waits in the ice. Two friends, both preserved across the same millennium by two different accidents, dug up into the same future. The show keeps binding Bender's fate to Fry's, keeps putting the robot at the crucial junctions of the human's impossible loops, as though even the time travel knows these two belong together. Bender is not the mighty one. Bender has no cosmic destiny, but he is there again and again at the seams of Fry's, a friend, woven into the paradoxes as surely as if he had been assigned to them. There is a reading of Bender and Fry that I find moving, which is that Bender is the family Fry lost, remade in metal. Fry had a brother, Yancey, who he thought was against him and who turned out to have loved him all along, who named a son after him and carried his memory forward. And in the future, Fry has Bender, who acts like he is against him, who mocks him and steals from him and would never say a kind word to his face, and who turns out, every single time it matters, to be completely on his side. Bender is Yancey translated into the future, the sibling relationship reborn in a body that could not be more different, the same underlying truth that the person who acts like they do not care about you is spending their whole life proving otherwise. Fry lost a brother to the conspiracy and found one waiting for him 1,000 years later, wearing a metal shell and pretending to have no heart. And Futurama lets that friendship carry real weight in its saddest moments, which is how you know it means it. When Fry is at his lowest, when he feels most useless, it is often his sense of his place among these friends that is at stake, and Bender is right there in it. Even the episode where Fry learns he is the mighty one begins with him feeling that his friends, Bender included, do not need him, that they would be fine without him. The whole cosmic reveal is triggered by an ordinary ache about friendship, about whether the people you love actually want you around. Fry does not go to Eternium because he wants a destiny. He goes because he feels unwanted at Planet Express, unwanted by Leela, unnoticed by Bender, and that small human loneliness is the door the cosmic story walks through. The conspiracy, over and over, turns out to be activated by ordinary feelings. The fear that you do not matter to your friends, the wish to be loved, the loneliness of the person who cannot see his own worth. The universe-ending stakes are real, but the thing that actually moves Fry every time is whether the robot and the woman and the crew would miss him if he were gone. That is why Bender belongs in any honest account of the Fry conspiracy, even though he has no brainwave and no prophecy and no part in the ancient war, because the conspiracy is finally a story about a man's relationships, about what he lost and what he found, and Bender is at the center of what he found. The cosmic machinery is the frame. The friendship is inside the frame, doing the real work, keeping Fry tethered to a life worth saving. When Nibbler asks what one life is worth against the universe, part of the answer, the part the series cares about most, is a robot who would tear a hole in time for a friend he refuses to admit he loves. That is what was in the balance, not just a weapon, a person with people. So what is the whole thing for, in the end? We have followed it all the way through now, the push and the pet and the war and the brainwave and the grandfather and the reveal and the flower and the films and the frozen world, and it is worth asking, before we close, what all this elaborate machinery was actually built to do. Because a lesser show would have built a mystery this intricate simply to be clever, to reward the fans who froze frames and cracked ciphers, to be a puzzle. Futurama did make a puzzle, but the puzzle was never the point. The puzzle was the delivery system for a feeling, and the feeling is the whole reason it exists. Here is the argument, as plainly as I can make it. The Fry conspiracy takes the single saddest fact about being a person, that you did not choose the circumstances of your life, that you were placed where you are by forces that never asked you, that you have lost things you can never get back and cannot even always remember, and it makes that fact literal and cosmic and specific. It gives the arbitrariness an author in Nibbler. It gives the loss a price tag in a mother and a brother and a dog. It gives the not knowing a mechanism in the erased memories. It gives the meaning you cannot see a name, the mighty one, and then it refuses to let the man carrying that name ever hold on to it. And having built all of that, having turned the ordinary ache of existence into a science fiction epic, it does the one thing that redeems the whole exercise. It lets the man be happy anyway. Not because the machinery is undone, not because he gets his old life back, not because the cost is refunded, but because inside a life he did not choose and cannot fully understand, he finds people and he loves them. And that turns out to be the thing worth all of it. That is a truly radical piece of optimism to bury inside a comedy, and it is easy to miss because the show never says it out loud. Most stories that reach for meaning this big get solemn about it. Futurama refused. It kept the jokes running the entire time, kept Fry an idiot, kept Bender a criminal, kept Zoidberg eating things he should not eat, and it let the profound thing live underneath all of it without ever pausing the comedy to point at itself. The result is a show you can watch as nothing but a funny cartoon about the future and enjoy completely. And also a show that, if you look at it the way we have looked at it tonight, turns out to be as sustained a meditation on love and loss and time as television has produced. And both of those shows are the same show, playing at the same time, and you get to choose how deep you go. Almost nothing else works on both of those levels at once for as long as this did. And the reason it holds up under the deep reading, the reason the pieces actually fit when you assemble them, comes back to those scientists in the writer's room, to the discipline that planted a payoff and waited years to land it, to the people who built a second cipher because the fans beat the first one. They brought the rigor of proof to the construction of feeling. Every emotional beat in the Fry conspiracy sits on a foundation of consistent, worked-out logic. The loops closing exactly, the causes preceding the effects even when the reveals do not. And that structural soundness is why the emotion lands so hard. You believe the sadness because you believe the mechanism. A shakier show could make you cry once with a dog and a door, but it could not make the whole architecture of a life hold together across all those years, and 4 films and 3 networks. Futurama could because the people who made it could not help building things that hold. I will keep the summary short because you have heard it all now. A guardian disguised as a pet chose an ordinary man, cost him everything, and made him the savior of the universe, and never let him remember it, and the man built a good life anyway out of the wreckage, and loved a woman and a robot and a strange crew, and chose at the very end, when he finally got to choose, to go around and do all of it again. That is the conspiracy. It is a machine for turning the worst thing about being alive into a reason to be glad you are. And maybe that is why the shadow could hide in the first frame for all those years without anyone minding once they found it. Because a story like this does not lose anything by being seen. When you finally understand what was done to Fry, you do not feel cheated, you do not feel Futurama tricked you. You feel the way you feel when you learn something true and sad and important about someone you love, that it deepens them, that it makes the ordinary surface of their life mean more, not less. The secret under Futurama was never a trap. It was a gift left in the first minute for whoever would come back and look. A whole hidden life waiting under a punchline, patient as the creature who planted it, sure that eventually someone would notice and understand and stay to hear the rest of the song. There is one last reading I want to offer before the end, and it is speculation on my part and interpretation rather than anything Futurama claims, so take it as that. When the brain spawn were dreamed up, back around the turn of the millennium, the idea of a race that wants to gather every scrap of information in existence into one great memory bank was pure cosmic comedy, a joke about knowledge taken to an absurd extreme. But sitting here now, years later, in a world that has spent the whole intervening time building exactly such a thing, giant server farms full of the sum of human knowledge, an endless drive to catalog and index and store every fact and image and thought anyone has ever produced, the brain spawn read a little differently than they must have then. I am not saying the writers predicted anything. I am saying they identified an impulse, the impulse toward total information, and followed it to its logical end. And the end they found has aged into something that feels less like a cartoon and more like a warning. Because the horror of the brain spawn, read this way, is not that they are alien. It is that they are the completion of a very human wish. We do want to know everything. We do build machines to hold all of it. There's a genuine part of the modern world that treats complete information as an unquestioned good, that assumes more data, more record, more catalog is always better, that the goal is to capture and store and never lose anything. And the show, in the brain spawn, follows that assumption past the point where it stays comfortable and shows you where it leads if nothing else is allowed to matter. It leads to a place where the living, changing, unfinished world becomes an obstacle, because a living world keeps generating new things to know and so keeps the record forever incomplete. The brain spawn are what the desire to archive everything becomes when it stops caring about the difference between a life and a record of a life. They want the library so badly they are willing to burn down everything the library is about. And Fry against them is almost the perfect opposite, which is the part I think is not an accident even if the modern parallel is mined. Fry is the least informational person imaginable. He retains almost nothing. He learns almost nothing. His memory is wiped again and again, and even when it is not, he was never much of a vessel for facts to begin with. He is pure present tense, a man who lives in the moment because he cannot really hold much of anything else. If the brain spawn are the worship of stored information, Fry is the living refutation of it, a person whose entire value has nothing to do with what he knows or remembers, and everything to do with what he is, an absence where the data should be, a hole in the record that turns out to be the only thing that can save the record from itself. The universe's weapon against the beings who want to know everything is a man who knows almost nothing and matters more than all of them. Read that way, the whole cosmic war is an argument about what actually gives a life worth, and the series comes down hard on the side of being over-knowing, presence over record, the living, unfinished person over the perfect, complete archive. In a fight between a library that wants to be finished and a man who cannot even remember his own heroism, Futurama wants the man to win. I think, in this present of ours, that is worth hearing, and it is worth remembering as we come to rest that within the show, none of this is finished. The Nibblonians did not disband after the infosphere fell. Nibbler is still there, still curled on the ship or on a lap, still watching, and the war he has fought since the first instant of the universe does not end because one battle went the right way. Fry is still the only being of his kind, still the hole in the record, still the weapon that could be needed again. Whatever happens in the newest stretch of Futurama, out on Hulu now, the underlying situation has not changed. There is an ancient creature disguised as a pet, and there is a man who does not know how important he is. And there is a universe that only keeps existing because of an accident in a desert and a decision in a cryogenics lab. The conspiracy is not a closed case. It is an ongoing condition. Somewhere in the future, the Guardian is still guarding, and the man he saved is still, blessedly, not thinking about any of it, just living his small, enormous life with the people he loves. And of everyone in the story, the one who understands the least about what he means is the only one who gets to be happy. There is a kind of mercy in that if you look at it right. The mighty one gets to be a person. The savior gets to forget he saved anything. And the flower keeps getting given over and over by a man who never quite knows why, to a woman who is glad to receive it either way. That is where I want to leave it tonight. Futurama is one of those rare things that got smuggled past everyone, a show that looked like a silly cartoon about a delivery boy and a robot and turned out to be a patient, decades-long argument about love and loss and time, written by scientists who dressed their heartbreak up as jokes and trusted us to find it eventually. It was canceled and it came back. It was canceled again and it came back again. It got laughed at for being lowbrow while it was busy doing some of the finest long-form storytelling television had ever attempted, planting a shadow in its first minute and paying it off years later, building a whole hidden life under a punchline. Most shows are lucky to be remembered at all. This one buried its deepest meaning so well that people are still digging it up, still noticing the thing in the dark under the desk, still realizing, years after they first watched, that the saddest and most beautiful story they knew had been sitting inside a comedy the entire time, waiting. And when you really take it in, the whole shape of it, the frozen man and the waiting dog and the ancient guardian and the missing brainwave and the flower he does not understand, what stays with you is not the cleverness, impressive as it is. What stays with you is how kind it turns out to be underneath. It looked at the most ordinary, overlooked, dismissed person it could imagine, and it said, "You matter more than anyone will ever tell you, and your life had a purpose you will never get to see, and the thing they mock you for is the thing that saves everything. And even if you never know any of that, even if it is all taken from your memory, you can still build a life full of love out of the wreckage, and that will be enough." That is a lot of tenderness to hide inside a show about the future. I am glad it is there. I am glad we got to spend this long finding it. If there is a single thing to carry off into sleep from all of this, let it be the smallest and the strangest piece of it. The one with nothing to do with brains or wars or paradoxes. Let it be the fact that the one being the universe could not do without spent the whole of his story being underestimated by everyone he knew, and that it never once made him bitter. Fry is mocked, dismissed, condescended to, forgotten, used, and erased, and he stays, through all of it, kind. He keeps loving the people who overlook him. He keeps trying, badly, at the things that matter to him. He keeps giving flowers he does not understand to a woman he is not sure will have him. A show built by some of the sharpest minds who ever wrote comedy chose, as the vessel for its deepest meaning, the gentlest and least clever character it had, and I do not think that is a coincidence either. I think they were saying that goodness and importance do not live where the world tells you to look for them, that the person at the bottom of every room might be the one holding it up, and that the surest sign of a soul worth saving is not what it knows or wins, but how tenderly it keeps treating a world that never treats it well back. Fry was worth a universe, not because of the missing brainwave, because of who he was around it. So that is the entire Fry conspiracy, from the shadow to the flower, as complete as I can make it. Thank you for staying with me all the way through it, and for letting it carry you off toward sleep. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.